right. Good evening, everyone. This won't be a long one. I am acclimating to the particularly humid weather that is in this part of America. I'm not exactly accustomed to it. I come from a very arid and dry climate, so I hope you'll forgive me if my voice doesn't sound exactly as it typically does. Good evening, everyone. Thank you for being here. I just wanted to take a few moments to actually finally give an official response. Do want to give props to Praise for his most successful stream in many, many, many months. He learned the same trick that Nakasuchi had learned. Best way to get views is to do a video about Smokey. Yes. No one will generally tune to your channel Praise for anything that you're doing of your own. You don't really have a lot of value in exegesis, theology, philosophy. You need other people who are far more interesting and credible than you are. I want to elaborate a little bit tonight for you, Praise, on exactly the depth of mistake that you have actually tread upon, and what a disaster it was to invite those two raging, dishonest cows into your stream. I would like to point you for a moment down to the description. This is where I would like to start with my preface, what it is that I have to say. I don't intend this to take very long, because frankly, I'm tired. I'd like to go lay down, but I felt compelled to at least to get a couple of these things off my chest. And as we know, the drama whores out there will eat this up. It's not really for them. It's for the rest of you. It's for Praise himself, so that he can realize the depth of error that he's actually perpetrated and what most likely will come to follow. I'm far smarter than you will ever be, Praise, a better debater, a more competent theologian, a more knowledgeable Christian than you could ever be, even if you studied for 3 of my lifetimes. You're an embarrassment. But let me say this to begin. Thank you, Kenny, for allowing me to stream to your channel. I'll try to give a certain consideration of respect to my dialectic with that being considered, and also with some of the counsel that I have heard recently from our dear beloved Dr. Falk. So, allow me to start with this. This is my thing. Praise, I want you to get Kenny's name out of your fucking retarded, treacherous, duplicitous, hypocritical mouth. This is between you and me. It doesn't have anything to do with Kenny. Now, you may feel the need to drag those stupid skirts to defend yourself. I am no such inept, demasculinated coward as you are, Praise. Not require anyone to defend me. I'm more than capable of doing it myself. I do not need you to drag Kenny to an issue that I have with you. You have an issue with Kenny, you take it up with him. You have an issue with me, you take it up with me. I want you to get Kenny's name out of your stupid mouth. And you can focus on me. I am your opposition now, Praise. And it will be that way in perpetuity. No matter what you say, no matter what you apologize for, no matter how you flip-flop. This will be the standard method of operation moving forward when it comes to you. And we'll relay to you, Praise, yet again, another prediction for the misery that's about to befall your stupid, treacherous head. I was right before. I always have been, Praise, when it came to you. I've waited for your backstabbing, and nonsense, and I've been forgiving. I've taught you lessons. I've anticipated your very simple-brained moves and reactions. I've anticipated your failure. I've anticipated your ineptitude. And I've been able to put you, by your own actions, in very uncomfortable situations that have shamed you and have exposed the entirety of the community that you're an untrustworthy idiot. So, you should focus on me. I will contend with you at any point in time, publicly or privately, on this very topic. Try to leave your sister and her freaking idiot friends out of it. And you should be able to stand up like a man and contend for yourself rather than running to a couple of loud bovines to do your dirty work for you. Do not care about the idiotic, low IQ bloviations of those dumb twats that you have aligned yourself with. So, since I have said that, allow me to now continue with the primary content of which I want to discuss, including a little bit of a prediction. There is one thing you can predict of praise. It is inconsistency. It's the most predictable thing about him. You can understand that he is a full-blown liability of association. Olive, I know you love your brother, but you got involved after saying you wouldn't. This was my fight, Olive. It was my fight with your brother, but you just couldn't help yourself. You and Sparrow just had to speak up. Well, fine. So be it. Since you wanted to be involved, I'll allow you to stay involved, since this is the lot that you have wanted to cast out. So, that was an embarrassment. Not only did you have that idiot, that burnout, that complete and utter damnable, hellbound moron Irenic hosting that dumb trash. You guys wasted 20 minutes of the stream trying to figure out how to even get anything to work. What a shame. What a bunch of nonsense. It's fine. I expect us. No, it's not weird. It's not weird, Eric, unfortunately. As Shayla turned tail along with Sparrow and Olive. So I want to, it was a little surprising. I expected a little better of some of these, well, for lack of a better word, women, but it is what it is. So having dealt with praise for going on close to about 2 years now, I've dealt with probably a dozen plus betrayals and reconciliations. Praise turning on me, aligning with detractors and Satanists I've exposed, heretics, haters, unsaved, and even atheists themselves that he claims to repudiate and despise. I've had to stomach a lot of disgusting character and complete abandonment of any semblance of Christian ethics from praise, only to have him turn around and try to wax moral in a comically ridiculous, hypocritical affair. And yet I was always there to forgive. Well, after my conversation the other evening with Kenny and Dr. Falk, both public and private, I've come to a bit of peace with the situation. They're right. They're right. Dr. Falk and Kenny are correct and called to operate with Christian ethics. I am called to forgive. Well, thank you, Sword of Truth. Appreciate it. You know, is Basement in the house? Basement, are you in the house? I would appreciate being able to tell the real Sword of Truth from the fake Sword of Truth. Eric, would you do me a favor? Just so that I can, I can verify. Give me a minute. Basement, will you verify it is him? Do me a favor. For the sake of simplicity, for the time being, I believe that we can trust Eric to not be a complete scumbag considering our interaction today. Would you please bestow upon Eric a wrench so that we will be able to know in perpetuity that it is indeed the real him? And if one of the clones pops up, we will not be caught off guard or deceived by the disgusting antics of his detractors. I would appreciate that. Go ahead and bestow upon him a wrench so that we can tell for future. Eric, I will request that you not implement or utilize the wrench, but simply use it as an opportunity for you to be recognized for the real individual, despite any sock accounts that might show up and attempt to deceive or attempt to defame you or attempt to harm your reputation. I've had enough of that done to myself. I don't wish it done to anyone, including individuals that I don't necessarily particularly like or don't like me. I despise SFT far more than you, Eric, and I still allow him to have a wrench. So it's not really that big of a deal. I do trust you to your word, under your faith or claim of faith, that you won't use it. And I appreciate that. Thank you. Very good. Let's move on. I'm going to just make a few things clear in terms of a prediction, ladies and gentlemen, what you can anticipate to see in the future. Many times this has become very clear to me. I have made this note to praise many times in the past, and I've always been willing to reconcile. Why? Because I loved praise. I loved praise like a little brother. I even protected him like a little brother. I got his back. I defended him from attackers, from slanderers, from discreditors. I defended him in rooms of debate and open sessions in Clubhouse. I always had Praise's back, even when he was constantly stabbing me in mine. I am confident and comfortable saying that I have indeed fulfilled my Christian obligation of ethics, and I will not cease. I will also give my ethics credence now, as I will implement them just again, with, of course, a minor caveat, different than times past. I do not want to know Praise anymore. I do not want to associate with him ever again. I will never get his back again. I will never defend him again. I will never go out of my way to try and protect him again. I will never allow him within the vicinity of me or my community ever again. He's a complete liability of anyone he associates with. A sad, lonely, pathetic, nearly mentally worthless, untrustworthy, deviated rodent who does not really actually have the capacity to maintain any semblance of consistency, decency, or higher ethics, while he claims to speak for Christianity and for the standards of Christian ethics and morals when he really truly has none. That was a shameful affair. Let me start with one of the things that's on the top of my head that I didn't actually address the other evening when I was addressing this in passing. Praise, you've made an error in judgment in more ways than one. And I do want to start with this simple statement. I want it to be very, very clear. Sparrow, for lack of any better descriptor, to summarize your ousias, your essence, it's become basically necessary for me to appeal to you a certain pejorative that is generally reserved for the worst of your particular respective gender group. You, Sparrow, are a filthy, lying cunt. Yes, I used the C word. I did. That is her ousias. How dare you attempt to assume or even to dare imply, with no evidence, with no knowledge that my family hates me or that I hate them. You evil, wicked, lying whore. You know nothing about me or my family, and yet you have transposed yourself into a position of a claim of knowledge. That my family somehow must despise me because they don't want to get involved in my environment. Again, to reiterate, it's not their job, nor responsibility, nor expectation to do so. This is my work. This is my channel. This is my intent. This is my opportunity, for lack of a better word. And you don't need to worry about me or my family, nor do you need to try and assume relationships therein with absolutely no justification, with absolutely no evidence. It's a shameful, sad, sick, disgusting thing for you to claim out of your desperation to find some point to make. Because neither of you women had any real points to make. So you had to do what the rest of the degenerates do and just start making crap up. That's exactly what you did to try and fill time the other night. Neither of you had anything substantive, reasonable, or ethical to present to us, to my community, or to the room full of hateful degenerates that filled your side chat the other night. The fact that you thought it would be a good idea to lie, to be dishonest, to go against your word, and then on top of that, to then bring that disgusting, weird, open theistic Pelagian burnout in the room to host it. Could you not find an actual Christian to come in and help you in your duplicitous, double-speaking, nonsensical ways? Was there literally no one else that could have at least given your weird, bizarre ramblings last night some semblance of increased credibility? You had to bring in a damnable, nonsensical Pelagian? Doesn't make sense. But you thought somehow that was going to give you some credit. I will never really understand that choice whatsoever. So, you already basically murdered your credibility before you guys even got the stream started and spent near 20, 30 minutes trying to figure out how to get everything to work. I recommend next time that you're going to go in there and demonstrate and advertise your particular brand of stupidity. Why don't you do a little test stream first to make sure you get everything working so you don't look like a bunch of dumb, fumbling idiots at the beginning of a stream, supposedly to call me out. Bad show. Really kind of makes it look like, why should I care what some of the stupidest women and one dumb raging queef have to say about me? Really didn't carry, I think, the effect that you were most likely hoping. Did you not notice your side chat? Who was in your side chat last night? Praise? Who was it? Atheists, heretics, Satanists, haters, revilers, slanderers, liars, whores, and all of these people enjoying it very, very much. Why? Not out of righteousness, praise, not out of decency, not out of morality, but fueled and inspired by untethered rage and hatred. And that's all that you manage to entertain. And now, well, praise, they've gotten their use out of you. Did you not realize that? How these people truly all hate you. You're not going to win them over. You're not going to get their respect moving forward because you've yet once again thrown one of your friends under the bus, one of the few friends that was willing to constantly get your back, even though you had constantly stabbed me in mine. You don't know what you really ultimately ended up costing yourself. But you know what? I'll tell you what, Praise. Dr. Falk, Dr. Kenny, they were right. They were right. I need to forgive. I'm obligated to. I don't have a choice. This is part of the path of sanctification. One is required to not hold bitterness or rage or anger or a desire to necessarily perpetrate or manifest revenge. It's not the Christian calling. It's not the right thing to do. And so I won't. I won't. And praise God by his mercy, by his grace, by the work of his Holy Spirit. I don't feel bitter towards you, Praise. I pity you. I do. I really do. I feel bad for you. Not because of your ineptitude and persistent moral failings, although that is worthy of pity as well, because you don't really know what you've actually done to yourself. You didn't have many people in your corner. You didn't have many people willing to put their necks on the line to try and defend you. I was one of the few. And I was willing to do so, and your enemies were fearful of me, not you, me, because I was willing to get your back, and I am a contender to deal with, as you have seen many times in the past. Even your disgusting fraud friend, the hypocrite moron used car salesman Donnie, SFT, standing for truth, he will fail as well. He doesn't actually care about you at all. He doesn't much care about anything except for views and popularity and how much he can excuse the deviant, philandering adulterer Ken Hovind for doing. It's really all a standing for truth has ever cared about. Surface perceptions, a bunch of worthless, nonsensical pseudoscience being repeated ad infinitum for a bunch of clapping swine and seals. So that's completely, ultimately irrelevant to me. Standing for truth will reap the fruit of the rancid unions that he has put before himself, and I'm willing to bide my time and pray over it and allow God to open up the pristine and perfect opportunity. I don't need to be bothered because I do believe it is in God's hands. If God actually cares for SFT at all, well, then he will be corrected in time. I won't have to do anything other than pay attention and apply the right pressure at the right time. So, Praise, you've made a massive error of ethics. It's unfair for you to go after Kenny at all. You should have reserved your nonsense for me and me alone. You should not have even had that stream with Sparrow, the treacherous idiot, and that Olive, Finch, whatever she wants to be called. What a shameful affair, Praise. You didn't even have the spine, the integrity, or the masculine fortitude to show up and do your own dirty work. You had to call in a couple of skirts to come and do it for you. What a sad thing. I don't need that, Praise. I'm right here. I'm available. You can always contend with me. Let's face it, you know you can't actually contend, and you know it. You know, anytime you've ever tried, I have slapped and exposed you and embarrassed you. Each and every time you have tried to go against me, each time you have betrayed me, I've ended up having to teach you a lesson of the true depths of your depravity and the consequences therein. You think you've made a bunch of friends now, Praise, by throwing your one reliable friend under the bus? Think you're going to reap goodness by being a raging, immoral hypocrite? You think these people are going to care about you for 5 minutes after you facilitated your use? They're not like me, praise. They're not loyal like me. It's willing to stay loyal to you as long as you gave some semblance of reciprocity. I always had your back, praise. Cared for you more than pretty much anyone in this community. I fought you on oneness when pretty much everyone else had given up on you. I didn't. I tried very, very hard. It was very, very tactical, strategic, to do everything I could to both pray as well as act to get you out of your damnable error so that you wouldn't lose your soul. Do you have any appreciation for that? Seemingly not really, not ultimately. I also got your sister, and so did many people in this community, to rethink her position and attachment to oneness. And also is something that was done by this community and by me as well. It got you to question, finally remove yourself from the free grace, fake gospel that you had absorbed under the raging antinomian morons standing for truth as well. Well, you had a good stream, didn't you? 60 people watching. When was the last time you had 60 people watching you, praise? Certainly isn't when you're discussing a theology topic. Certainly isn't for when you're hosting a debate. No. They all showed up because they wanted to bask in your moral deviation and depravity and join in on a witch hunt and satiate their bloodlust to slander and lie and revile, showing themselves to be of the exact moral character of you yourself. You should be reasonably ashamed by that. I'm not entirely sure if you're capable of shame. Let me assure you, praise, each one of these people you have now attempted to align yourself with are not true contenders of the faith, or not even true members of the faith. And yet you threw your lot in with them to betray me, to give me an ultimatum that you yourself did not have the integrity or the consistency to apply to yourself. You're a raging, embarrassing hypocrite. But this will be pretty much the end of my direct communication with you, praise. It does not matter if you come over here and apologize. In fact, you can save it. You don't need to. You don't need to hear your apology. What you endure in the coming months will end up being apology enough. But I will tell you this, I have moved to a point of peace in my heart about you and those women, if I dare be so bold as to give them such a title. These people will throw you in the garbage now, praise. You've facilitated your use, said you were done being manipulated, and yet you kowtowed like the mentally worthless, emotionally feeble coward that you are. And what you reap from this will be very unpleasant. And I know why. Because this time you knew better. You knew better. So did Olive. So did Sparrow. So did Shayla. So did any of those other degenerates that showed up in your side chat to lick their lips and feast on a river of blood that you are attempting to let from me. You did fail, ultimately, praise. That was a embarrassing show de force. It was showing how inept and feeble and demasculinated you actually are. You're not a man, praise. You're a little boy, and you're trapped in a man's body. And nothing displayed that more than you needing to run to get females to come and do your dirty work for you, and to do a disaster of a job in the process of doing so, showing that they needed to be dishonest, duplicitous, inconsistent, and idiotic all at the same time. And yet you, Praise, probably did not actually have any shame. Certainly Olive didn't, even though her grasp of theology is basically comical at best, and Sparrow was there to just basically be a yes man. Sparrow, question for you. There was some man in your house at the beginning attempting to help you set up your video and audio equipment. Sparrow, who is this worthless, effeminate cuck that doesn't have the nerve or the spine to actually speak as a man on this topic, that he's just going to sit there and hide and cower with his shriveled sack in the corner while he lets his girlfriend, fiance, wife, whatever the heck you are to him, go on a stream and run your freaking mouth in such a disgusting, unethical way. You see, Sparrow, I told Kenny that you were playing him. I told him that I don't think you were really particularly trustworthy. And it was a sad thing for both me and Kenny for me to be proven to be right yet again. Not really. I mean, super surprising for me, but it was super surprising for Kenny. And he was fundamentally not only disgusted by you, but also hurt. Hurt that you would show such an incredible, disgusting lack of ethical character. And you should apologize to Kenny. You don't need to apologize to me. I don't need the random low IQ bloviations of some, corn husking retard. I really don't need it, Sparrow. You don't really have any intrinsic ultimate value to me, but I was willing to be gracious to you and support as what I believe to be a sister in the Lord with some semblance of actual ethics, not yet having figured out what you actually are. Praise, Sparrow, Olive. Sparrow and Olive have done you no favors. Praise. In fact, the best thing they could have done was to keep their word and keep their filthy mouths shut. But they couldn't help themselves, could they? They felt compelled to go against their words and enter into the fight. Why? Why? Weren't you basically, essentially going to stay out of it? Because you didn't agree with your brother. You didn't agree with what your brother was saying or doing. I remember even receiving an apology and you saying that you were going to stay out of it. So be it. Allow it to be my fight, my interaction between me and Praise. Let us contend and settle things as needed. But then you couldn't help yourself, could you? You said so yourself. Praise didn't, tell you to do this. Praise didn't inspire you to do this, which means you, of your own volition, with no inspiration or inclination given from Praise at all, decided to be a duplicitous, dishonest person. And that is exactly what was displayed to anyone with common sense who wasn't in there to just engage in the orgy fest of hatred against Smokey. And you entertained that and you participated in it while claiming very much quite the opposite the other day. Do you have no honor, Sparrow? Olive? Do you really have no integrity? I can understand Olive needing to defend her brother. I mean, not really. You didn't need it, really. You could have just let him be a big boy and have his own fight. You didn't need to open your mouth. You could have just kept your word. Instead, you decided to get into it and then just run your mouth in disgusting, dishonest ways, both of you. As the stream went on, you seemed to have less care of the truth or any integrity out of your desperation to try and pry some substance out of your idiotic ramblings. And what is shameful, state of affairs to anyone that was actually watching with a sense of critical thinking and situational awareness. Let me tell you something, praise. Your use is now complete. Your use is complete to them. They will not be your friends. They will not respect you. They will not defend you. They will not support you. They will not be there for you. These are not Christians. They're frauds. I have pointed out many times in the past, and yet this is what you have cast your lot in with. Well, you will ultimately pay probably a pretty rough emotional penalty for that, of which you fully deserve. Because again, praise in this particular instance, unlike probably many instances in the past, this time you really truly did know better, and you did it anyway. Remember your talk, praise, about a high-handed sin, something that is done with full awareness and accountability, but is still perpetrated and causes negative consequential effects, and how that is worthy of a stricter and rougher punishment than pretty much all others. You have said this, praise, so you must understand what I'm talking about, which is why I think in this instance, you probably are going to be denied mercy. And these people, now that your use is done, will basically treat you like the garbage they see you to be. I was willing to defend you. I was willing to care about you. And I demonstrated it time and time and time again over the years. And yet, even then, none of that actually ended up meaning anything to you when you were attempting to decide what the best course of action was to do. You bowed to the manipulation of these disgusting deviants yet again. You're telling me you were done with that. You were done being manipulated by the disgusting, immoral, hypocritical sycophants such as SFT or Cheryl, only to yet again bend over and show your ass to the community. That's basically exactly what you did. And now, praise, it will begin to get much worse for you. And you will not have the benefit of smoky mercy as you have for the dozen or so times before this. Oh yes, I won't hold bitterness, praise. I'm going to let it go. I will move forward and continue to do what I'm doing. I'm not going to desire revenge or retribution or anything like that. It will happen to you on its own. You can see it as clear as day, as well as many of the observations that I've seen before this that I've imparted to you, and you know I've been right. And I will probably be right about this again. You've aligned yourself with the wrong people who don't love you, praise. They hate you. They hate you with a passion. The only reason they got behind you last night is because you were doing something that they wanted. But now that you have facilitated your purpose, I assure you that all of them are going to see fit to just go ahead and throw you in the garbage. You don't actually have any other value left to offer them. Your only value was attempting to convince you to strike at me because you're a weak man and people knew that I cared about you. So they knew that they could, well, attempt to strike at the heart because I've known for quite a while that I had a soft spot for you, that I demonstrated actual love for you above pretty much anyone else in your disgusting little community of frauds, idiots, and heretics. Now they will be done with you. You will find yourself on the banquet table here soon enough, and they will devour you and offer you up. And this time, there will be no reconciliation. There is forgiveness. I'm not going to hold it against you because I do actually feel bad for you. I think you're a very, very stupid, very pathetic man. I don't really think you're much of a man at all, honestly. I don't think you would even show up here tonight to actually contend with me and dare defend yourself. You need to now hide behind your sister's skirts, thinking that that somehow, in some insane way, gives you some semblance of credibility. Quite the opposite, praise. It shows you're a feeble, inept, worthless coward that needs to get women to do what you should do on your own and contend for yourself. You fail. You fail masterfully at a greater scale than pretty much any of your previous betrayals in the past. Your reputation is an inconsistent, constantly shifting flip-flopper, and you've shown it yet again. No one will really value or give what you've done very much credit, anticipating that you'll change your mind again. I believe you probably will. You have a chance to actually take a step back and reassess the true intrinsic weight of your error. I think you will actually probably try to reconnect. You will see, exactly as I have said, that these people that you have attempted to appease, that you have attempted to align with, will sell you down the river. They won't love you like I did. They won't care about you like I did. It's going to be a rude awakening for you as you see this unveil in the coming weeks. You are a joke to them, praise. Most of them hate you. Most of them don't care about you. And one of the few people you had that was willing to get your back and be there for you and support you, you yet again threw under the bus. So yes, praise. There will not be a maintenance of bitterness, but there will be a distance between us now from here on. There will be no further extension of mercy, nor will I take on the liability of association with you ever again. So I promise you, if you have an apology, shove it, keep it, don't bother. It won't lead to anything more than what is already being offered right here and now, which is the opportunity to forgive, but certainly not forget. To forget would to open myself up to you and your disgusting, unethical ways yet again, which I will not do. So you will no longer find mercy or reconciliation over here with Smokey. No, not again. I hope that you get what you need out of Sparrow and Olive, because that's going to be your tiny little circle of support for now quite a while. I hope you enjoy reaping this rancid, disgusting crop that you have sown. I can see it, praise. You probably are going to lose your channel. You probably are going to lose pretty much all of your friends. You're going to be misused. You're going to be abused. You're going to be handled poorly. And you're going to be very sad, be very alone. And the things that you had with me and people in this community, you will yearn to have again, but you will not find them again. They will never be on offer to you again. You are done in the Smoky environment or the Smoky community. I want nothing else to do with you. I never want to talk to you again. Never want to see you in any room I'm in again. I don't want to have any interaction with you whatsoever ever again. I want you to just go on your way of your prolific failures and embarrassments and worthlessness. I will just allow it to be. Don't bother to bring an apology. Again, do not bother. Nothing will change beyond what is the state of affairs right now. Where you have forgiveness, indeed, I'll not hold the bitterness, but I will not welcome you back into my good graces or realm of friendship or consideration ever again. Those days are done. We are over it. So I am moving forward. Seeker, I do not want to hear anyone whining about chat privileges. This channel usually is open for the opportunity of people to join. In fact, Seeker, here you go. Let's do this. Seeker has 30 seconds to enter the stream. Here. Seeker has 30 seconds to enter the stream, or you can be timed out the rest of it. There we go. Come pitch your disagreement. I dare you. So praise, this is going to pan out well for you. And this time, I will not offer myself to be around for mitigation of your suffering or consequences. I'll not simply suck it up and forgive and forget and let you continue on your nonsense again. If only Sparrow had the integrity, if only Olive had the integrity to actually reach out to me directly. Kenny, I'll let you in a minute. If only they had the integrity to reach out to me directly before basically being so dishonest and running out there and just running their freaking cow mouths. Maybe things would have gone different. Maybe Sparrow and Olive could have shown some semblance of moral integrity, and maybe this wouldn't have actually even needed to happen this way at all. Maybe the door could have still maintained open with praise, but they made sure that it would be permanently welded shut and sealed. They did. They made sure that I will never again, in any way, shape, or form, offer myself or my reputation or my time or my resources to try and defend praise or to get his back. He is now going to be isolated from any benefit that I ever offered him in any way, shape, or form. He will have to eat it. And that is how it is. I want one person to come in this room. Seeker. If Seeker does not come in the room, he can be timed out the whole rest of the chat. You see how that works, Seeker? I have very little patience for the disgusting coward chat rats that spurg around. If you think your disagreement is so good and so well thought out and so pristine, then you should have no difficulty coming into the stream to pitch it to me directly, not whining about the fact that you want to put it in chat in my platform on the side when you have open opportunity to come in the room and pitch it to me directly. Worthless little coward. All of you are cowards. You do not really honestly have the capacity to contend. You simply want to sit in my side chat and whine, not have to worry about having your stupidity subjected to cross-examination or questioning. You people are worthless. So why would I value your capacity to communicate in my channel with your keyboard when you won't have the integrity or the fortitude to show up and pitch it in person? Why would I give a crap about what you think you want to contribute to the channel and the environment? We wouldn't. Again, Kenny, just give me a minute and I'll let you in. So praise, this is an error that you have perpetrated, and this time the full weight and spectrum of consequences will be yours to experience. I hope your inept, incompetent cow squad can facilitate and fill in all the gaps that I was filling for you before this. You will lack a level of conversational protection and competency being around you. You will then be the fodder for the very people you claim to want to defend the faith against, and also to take on the opposition. You will now just be basically open prey for them. Smokey will not be there to get your back, defend you, or to bring your argumentation forward or shame those that attempt to attack you or put you down. You will not have any of those benefits ever again. I will not dedicate any of my resources or time to aiding you in any way, shape, or form. You are on your own. I hope you are happy with the people that you have chosen to align yourself with. I hope those stupid bovines are going to be enough to actually maintain for you. I hope that is valuable enough for you to basically be a counter exchange, an equaling of the scales to what you gave up with me. And you know it was good praise. You knew my ethics, you know my integrity, you knew how many times I was willing to forgive you in the past, and you just couldn't help yourself. You couldn't help yourself but do the same crap all over again. Now my conscience is clear. I feel I have every right to now want to say that I want no association with you whatsoever, ever again. Oh, standing for truth. I love it when you come in my side chat to whine. Are you enjoying your wrench, standing for truth? While I'm still blocked on your channel, you spineless, worthless coward. Does it look like my channel's having problems right now, buddy? Mm. You know what's damage control standing? Every time you have to try to defend the disgusting character of Kent Hovind. So what I don't know why you want to talk about damage control. You basically have to do damage control for that raving old degenerate nearly every week. We did that video the other day, and where were you? Crickets. Crickets. Well, don't worry, standing for truth. Your reputation, having been tied to Kent Hovind, will let you reap a rich crop here eventually, you worthless coward. What was it that you said? I'll debate anyone on evolution except Smokey? That's interesting. Why are you so scared, Standing? Is it because I can destroy your favorite genetic entropy argument in 5 minutes flat? Would that be it? Taking your own stupid arguments and statements and turning around on you, showing how desperate and illogical and moronic you actually are? Your pseudoscience will fail to convince people for much longer, and I assure you, I will convince the atheists that all of their hatred for your disgusting, deviant pseudo philosophy is all worthy of it. Hopefully, souls will be saved by pointing out what a disgusting, worthless fraud that you are, SFT. SFT, it wasn't too hard to get you to betray all of your principles. Didn't you used to tell me that you stayed out of drama? Look how easy it was for you to jump right into it because you're just a hateful swine. What a sad, sad state of affairs. What a pathetic, tiny little man you are, Standing. And you've embarrassed yourself, but of course, you don't feel any shame. Look at the disgusting trash Kent Hovind that you constantly align with and defend. It ruins your reputation with each ongoing day, well, except for those of your deviated, hellbound cult members. So, and you too, Jason. Jason, piss off. You're an absolute waste of time too. You're a dumb degenerate, some stupid middle of the earth dumb alcoholic hick hanging out in Australia, wasting time getting drunk, coming on the internet, spewing a bunch of unscientific, idiotic crap that just makes everyone laugh at you. You people are a joke. So go ahead, run your mouths. See if anyone actually believes that, oh, you've taken down the Smoky. Have you? I'm still here, not running away. You are. I don't see any of you trying to come in the room. I don't see any of you trying to contend or defend yourselves. I see standing for truth, running from debates with me with any topic I'm willing to put up. Standing for truth is a coward, degenerate, completely, absolutely, fundamentally, spiritually worthless. Well, I think that's all I had to really, for the most part, say. Standing, you might want to stick around a minute. Maybe Kenny would like to have something to address with you, because I think Kenny has finally realized that pretty much everything I've said about you has now finally been right. Go ahead, Kenny. If you'd like to take the mic, I've basically summarized everything I needed to say. So if you want to say a few things, by all means, feel free.
Well, actually, I have told everybody that if their name is in my mouth, I will come after them. If they keep their name out of my mouth or their mouth, I will not come after them.
So be it.
So Standing and I have talked, and we've come to a consideration that this is between you and him, and he's going to keep me out of it, and I'm going to stay out of it.
So be it. Anything else you want to say then?
Yes, I would. The kind of lack of integrity that I'm seeing is very, very concerning to me. Now, I'm not here to call out names. I've already done that kind of stuff. I'm going to take a little bit of a higher ground and try to encourage people to actually pursue righteousness in Christ likeness, um, because there's a real problem with people jumping into the flesh uh, all around the community. And I think we're really doing us more harm than good. Um, you all know my position. Until praise repents of this utter and complete lunacy, especially pulling me into it. You guys can deal with all you want. It's between you two. You know, if, hey, everybody is guilty here. Everybody's done wrong. Everybody's been in the flesh. And I'm not excluding myself even. Um, Sometimes we get emotional and we let our lesser values kick in. And I'm wanting to take higher ground because we've been in the mud, we've lost a lot of ground, and our hands are dirty. And I would like us to be gentlemanly and Christian toward one another. But the moment I see that people are disingenuous, not using critical thinking skills, I will be on them like ugly on ape, white on rice, and stank on a turd. I'll be there faster than they can even imagine. But if people show some humility, I'll be a friend and we can work. But the moment the dishonesty's there, praise is just a loony. He's a nut. Uh, Everybody knows where I am with him. And he is, once again, persona non grata with me. I think he's done a tremendous sin against you and against his own dad. And he will pay the price. And I just want to warn those out there, standing included. He knows that I've said to him, if you guys are fighting, you keep it clean. You don't, quote unquote, you don't fricking throw out pedophilia because it's wrong standing. You know it's wrong. I pointed it out. And I've told you. So if you guys want to debate,
Penny, come in the room real quick. Let's debate it right now. 15 minutes. I'll set the timer. 2-minute responses, 5-minute openings. We'll finish it real quick. 15 minutes. I'll destroy you. Go ahead. Come on in the room. Kenny can moderate.
yeah,
Let's do it.
yeah, and I would like to.
It'll take 5 minutes to destroy your favorite argument. Go ahead. Come in the
Yeah,
room. You can
I
even
would like
post
to
it.
encourage you,
You can post it.
standing.
I'm sure you'll want to be proud of it, and you want to post it.
Yeah,
Come in the room.
yeah, I will make sure it's fair.
There you go.
You know where I stand with you. I
You
love
can
you.
destroy
I
your
love
whole argument
Smarty.
in 5 minutes. Go ahead. Come in the room.
But I would encourage you that if you want that masculine tag that has, the guts to not just sit in the sideline and poke with the keyboard, but come in and let the intellect fight this battle. Let it be fair, and let's see. Put your money where your mouth is. I encourage everybody to do this. It's good for us. If we have these issues, they need to be confronted without false accusations, false narratives, and memes, and cool slogans. I mean, those things sell, but it's not about truth. So if you want to stand for truth, come in. I'll make it fair, and let's just get this over with and see who actually has the balls and the mojo to win this battle.
I'm tired. My head is foggy, but it doesn't matter. I can take on his stupid, fallacious argument even right here, right now. Let's do it. Let's get it done. You won't debate me on soteriology. You're too cowardly for that. This is your speciality. Come in the room. You say I'm scientifically illiterate. I don't study this stuff typically. Embarrassing would it be for you if you lost your favorite argument to me right now, late at night? Get in the room. Let's do it.
Yeah, this is
Get it
perfect
done.
because you guys aren't prepared. And let's see, this takes all the pretense, all the posturing out of it. And standing, I would, uh, really give you kudos and respect if you would stop the in and out, the jab, the run, the jab, the run, and actually stand your ground and fight. I'll make it fair. You know me, I promise you it'll be fair.
Well, standing, I
Preparing
don't want
myself for
to. I really don't want to wait here for 30 minutes. As I just said, it's late. I'm tired. I just want you to get in the room. Just you're on some sort of device right now. Just get in the room. Why you need your laptop? Just get in the. Can you not give a 10 to 12-minute delivery without your freaking worthless idiot slideshow? You can
Yeah,
take
no
as much time as you want.
slideshows, no
By the way, I'll
nothing.
tell you what.
Let's
You
go
can
off
have
of
as much
just
time as you want. Hold on, Kenny. You can have as
okay.
much time. You can have as much time as you want for your opening. I don't care. Fumble through it if you need. I don't care. Do it. Go ahead. You need your laptop. Just get in.
Yeah,
So
we'll
what? I
stay
don't
on
care if you're on
topic.
your phone. You can join on your phone. Just get in the
Yeah,
room.
I promise you, if Smokey goes low, I'll reprimand
I don't
him. If
need
you
to go
go low,
low.
I'm gonna reprimand you. So we're gonna make
It's
this.
his own argument about homozygosity and heterozygosity, and he can give his opening. He can take as long as he wants. I'll give my argument. Take me less than 5 minutes. We're done. That's it. He can respond. See if he can respond. See if he can retort. If he can, great. If he thinks he's proud of it, great. Let's finish it. Settle it. Let's get it done.
Yeah, I mean, it's not gonna hurt anybody. If anybody loses, it's a great learning experience. Trust me, I've lost all my life
Sure.
to Tammy.
Sure. Well, he's going to take 15 minutes. So I'll tell you what, you guys talk, and I'm going to go get myself a beverage and a hot tea. So go ahead and have a chat for
All
a few
right.
minutes. He apparently needs at least, I guess, 15 minutes or something, I suppose. I'm willing to wait. So fine, let's do it.
this is going to be epic, guys. By the way, hello.
It is, hush, Pokey, 1 second.
Sorry.
It is currently 10:41 p.m. where I am located. So we will give you until 11 p.m. I'll give you 20 minutes. So 11 p.m. I will actually stick around and I will wait just for this. So beautiful. Love it. Love to get down to the bottom of this. And yes, I do promise you no ad homs. Keep out of it. I'll save that for after. I'll wait for after for that. I'm sure you'll do plenty of that after as well. So yeah, absolutely. Let's get her done. I'll be right back. I'm going to go get myself a nice hot tea to prepare my throat. I won't have to talk that much, but yeah, let's do it.
Hello, Kenny.
Boki, could you please tell me who your favorite apologist is? Just one more time. One more time.
Dr.
I promise
Kenny
I'll
Rose.
only ask you maybe 2 or 3 more times tonight, and then at least once a day from here on out.
Dr.
I'm
Kenny
reasonable.
Rhodes. Yeah, of course. Dr. Kenny Rhodes, you are my favorite Christian apologist.
Thank you. Now, who is your favorite Egyptologist?
Dr. Falk. I mean, well,
exactly.
I would
Dr.
say he
Falk,
would.
He's the bomb, man. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, I would say he's my go-to guy when it comes to the cultural stuff in the Old Testament. But when it comes to like God and everything and his tenets, yeah, I go to you.
I actually go to Dr. Falk when it comes to what is the best way to prepare popcorn. How much butter should one use? How much seasoning? Those types of things. Because he is a popcorn connoisseur of the greatest caliber. So yeah, exactly. No, I love Dr. Falk.
Cool.
I really do, especially when I notice that his hair is pulled back awfully tight. It looks like a ponytail resides behind his head. And once I saw that, I really, really, really thought, I don't care if the guy is dumb as a rock, but he's cool.
Hang on, Dr. Kenny. Shepard, but Boki, who's your favorite American? What do you guys want from me? A freaking cookie? I mean, do I have to give you favorite labels? Do I have to do that every single time? Well, stupid whore energy, whatever your name is. The question is still on you to answer. Who's more good looking, me or Dr. Kenny? By the way, I'm
Uh,
52%, so yeah, I have a sure
let's
win on
just
this one.
say you don't want to get embarrassed on this one there, Boki. So I would retract that question because let's just say that my swaggery among the
Hmm.
white chicks, you saw the movie White Chicks. You know how
I've
white
seen
chicks
one.
act. Yeah, so what I'm saying is the white chicks dig me. All the white chicks, and I dig all the white chicks. I dig all the brown, the black, and the yellow. I love women.
Ooh.
I'm sorry. I mean, not in that literal sense, but I thank God for the beauty of women. I love their minds. I love the way they think. I love the way they're so protective. I love the way that they're so different from us, like from another planet. It's beautiful because they're such a mystery. Um, it's fascinating to talk to the women
Hmm.
and to realize that, wow, such a beautiful and dangerous creature.
Wow. Dang. Oh, Shep is like, Boki, abort. I say again, abort mission. I don't know, Shep. Should I? Should I not? You know what? I'll take Dr. Kenny's word. I'm gonna be a wiser man learns from other people. A wise man. I'm gonna be a wise man. I'll just abort the mission. I don't think I
You
want to
really
do that.
bought you really bought that little crap I just gave you?
No, it's not. No, I do believe that. I do believe that you're really good looking, Dr. Kenny. It's just that it's this whole concept of whether or not who's more good looking. It's not about attracting as many ladies as you can. It's just about who's more good looking. That's it. I can be a good looking man and still not have ladies, flocking around me.
That's true. And to be quite honest, I find it flattering that, you know, uh, someone like yourself finds me attractive. Although I'm not gay
Of
whatsoever.
course.
I'm happy. I am a happy
Mhm.
man.
Of course.
But, you are a handsome man too. And I've learned that I can objectively analyze the features, the angles of, for example, the proportion of your nose and lips, considering the perfect angle in a isosceles triangle, uh, as it's set in contradistinction toward the lines of just your chin as it stands there prominent, masculine, truly the quintessential man, almost as great as Premier Putin, because he is the true expression of masculinity in his ability to wrestle grizzly bears and alligators and polar bears. He's really a manly man, very virile. You know my position. If this war does not go in accordance to Biden's plans and strategery and the way that he has envisioned how he's going to bring world peace, I trust that because so many millions and millions and millions of people voted for Biden, that he has our confidence and he can do it because 80 million Americans can't be wrong.
Right. All right. I'm done kissing my own ass. Anyway, I'm looking at the. I'm looking at the. Oh, Standing is also gonna challenge Smokester on soteriology. I'm gonna go prepare the questions. I'm gonna start, just shoving Titus 1 on his face with questions for it. You know, I have my three Bibles with me, and I have my commentary. Yes, I am going to. Well, I will. I would. I mean, I don't think I can ever debate SFT, but I will. I will challenge him with some questions.
No, SFT is the first released version of AI technology. I don't understand how the guy works 26 hours a day, but whatever they're doing with this new AI Android technology, I like it. I would really like to only sleep about 2 hours every 6 months, like Standing does. but I don't have the ability I used to when I was young. But now I'm old and lazy and grumpy, very grumpy. Especially when my boys fight and attack one another. I hate it.
Yeah. We all, I mean, I think I'm gonna get into that stage too. I mean, I think I'll be a whole lot more freaking, I wouldn't say angry and grumpy, but I would say irritable.
Yeah, it's that irritable bowel syndrome that keeps on popping up. I feel your pain.
Yeah. Sway, you still haven't answered you still haven't answered my challenge. But I'm not gonna force anything, all right? I was taught to be a gentleman, and if my mom found out I wasn't treating women right, she would slap me and take my wallet. That's no joke.
Oh, I believe you. Uh, my son is 6'5", 300 pounds. His mother is 5'2". And let me tell you, that boy gets a smack. Of course, he hadn't had a smack across the beaker in a while, but if he would be mean to his sisters, boy, mama jump on his butt and say, "You don't talk to a lady like that ever. Every lady you see is either your mother or a sister, or somebody's mother and somebody else's sister, and you treat ladies with the utmost respect." And
That is true.
he's a gentleman.
That is
There are
true.
gentlemen out there, ladies. And let me tell you about the young man that stole my heart. I told him just recently, I said, "Listen, Zach, 26 years ago, I knew I would hate you. So let's just put that aside for a moment. And let's just say you're all right. Because this kid so profoundly and strategically stole my heart by here in the Valley in California. Of course, I'm not in California right now. I'm in West Virginia. We have the very thick fog, and this boy drives about 40 minutes and follows my daughter home to make sure she gets there safe, turns around and drives back. That's a good man. And ladies, there are good men out there still. You just got to find them in church. So anyway,
And you know what? I'm not. I mean, you can't. I mean, not only can you find me in church, you can find me in your internet cafes. You can find me in the arcades, or I'm just in the house. Give me a ring if you know me, ladies. Crickets, crickets.
could somebody tell Praise that once Standing and Smokey are done dialoguing here, I would like to dialogue with Praise until he actually publicly repents of having my name in his mouth and assigning me some sort of responsibility to make a grown man do anything that Praise suggests or anybody else. You know how many texts that I get? Hey, you should tell Smokey to do this. You should tell Smokey to do that. It's amazing. I get them from Jamie Russell and other people. Hey, tell Smokey to yada, yada, yada. You know what? Smokey's a man. He's got a lot of testosterone too. Let me tell you what, two high level T men, there's one thing you don't do, and that's try to tell another man what to do. You don't do that. Now, you can suggest and you can offer advice, but to think that I can make anybody do what they don't want to do or force them to do something, not possible. It's the same way with me. The moment you tell me that I have to wear a mask, uh, I will do everything in my power to show you I don't have to wear that mask. And it's none of your business. It's none of your right to tell me to engage in your fiction concerning masks and protecting the population. Bottom line, masks work if you're sick. If you're not sick, you don't need a mask. I mean, it's ridiculous. Somehow COVID leaves on a particular day And now, whoop, you can go outside now. COVID is out and about until 10 p.m. and now we're safe. Anyway, ADHD moment. You're not going to tell people what to do, especially a high T-leveled man.
We're all high T level men here, are we?
You know, Mrs. Hoar, you should know that somebody as good looking as I, my spit does not have viruses and germs. As a matter of fact, I spit on the COVID and it kills it. Just saying.
A whole lot effective than Kenneth Copeland's breath of God blow to COVID. It's a whole lot more effective and it's a whole lot more tangible.
Where's everybody at? Because you know, I've had probably 2 kegs of beer tonight, and I'm pretty sloppy drunk, and I'm pretty sure I'm going to pass out at any moment now. So, guys, if you could step on it and let's get this debate going.
Right. Well, Smokester, on the other hand, is preparing himself some tea. And I don't know when Donnie's going to come up.
Yeah. You know, I've actually never wore a mask ever. And
Never.
for 2 years, I've evaded the COVIDs. You know how I caught it? Tucking my Aunt Ruth in at night, and I gave her a kiss. And I would rather give my Auntie Ruth a little peck on the cheek and tell her I love her, and I'll see her in the morning, and that when we get up, we're going to have coffee. I'd rather do that and have the experience in the moment. And COVID was more like just being tired for a couple weeks, and that was it. And that is what was supposedly going to kill millions of people all over the world.
Mm-hmm. Well, it did kill millions. It did succeed.
Yeah, but they were talking about, you know, in America here, 2 million. You know, they really upped up, you know, mask, you know, then mask, no mask, mask, this, that.
Right. Just opening up some commentary on Titus. Titus in Proverbs 1 verse 10.
110.
Yeah, because because through these commentaries and the sources, I'm gonna formulate my question.
Gotcha.
And you know, the funny thing is that while I formulate these questions, know that I also see myself in these commentaries. So it's not entirely one-sided. If the enemy's in sight, so are you.
Hold on, guys. Somebody fell here.
Sure.
How you doing this morning, Boki?
Oh, well, I got off, you know, playing Call of Duty and fought off some rebels and insurgents. And now I am here looking into the verse that I've been geeking about, and I will formulate my questions just to prepare some questions. That is, if this is still a formal debate.
Cool.
Yeah, I'm doing all right. Sorry, I also interrupted you there for a bit. I got all excited.
Oh, you're fine, bro. Don't worry about it.
Okay, man, I love Church Father's commentary. Really, I do. This is at a different level.
You know, the atheists aren't good many times dealing with like arguments from young earthers because they don't generally look at it internally.
Mm-hmm.
They always look at it externally, and they tend to do a lot of posturing. And basically, it doesn't need to be the whole thing of every single statement needs to open up with how incompetent they think the other side is. Like, it doesn't like that doesn't need to be the premise of every single statement. It's kind of like standing for truth's MO. I wonder if he will be willing to concede to the idea that the first person to use posturing or insult to the other side personally automatically loses the debate, because I know it's a necessary tactic that SFT employs pretty regularly. I wonder if he has the capacity to really be as professional as he claims he is through actual demonstration. I guess we'll find out.
I hope so.
I can hold back standing. I'm not entirely sure you can.
He also, and the thing is, I'm looking out. I'm looking for some good old commentary, and as you guys squall it off, I'm gonna read to formulate my questions because he wants to focus on your soteriology. So, what did he say about not going into soteriology, leaving the dust out of it, and now suddenly challenging you?
Sorry, guys. My Uncle Pete fell out of bed. I had to pick him up. So, but he's
Okay.
okay. He was just disoriented. But good thing I've been here because Aunt Linda, had knee surgery 2 days ago. So
Sure,
anyway,
no problem. That's okay. Fine.
According to,
it's late.
I know you're gonna hate me for this, Smokey, but according to Jerome at Titus 1:16, according to Jerome, some think that this verse applies only to those who deny the faith during a persecution. But the apostle contends that all perverse behavior denies God, whether you're saved or unsaved. That's
Right.
Jerome. Yeah, Jerome ad 420. Sorry, I had to do it.
Sure.
420. I'm preparing myself an espresso too.
I hate this humidity. This is not fit for someone who came from a primarily arid climate. This feels miserable. I hate the air out here. Oh, I hate it. Feels like I'm breathing through 2 inches of water. Feels like I'm being waterboarded everywhere I go. It's freaking terrible.
Well,
excuse me, guys. I'll be right back. I'm gonna go say hi to Praise.
Well, real quick, Kenny. Shep would like you to join the Discord. He's looking to hold a little chapel sessions on Sundays, and they need a preacher. I already said that I'm definitively not qualified, but they would like someone who would be willing to maybe on Sundays give a little sermon session for people in the community who could use a little bit of encouragement or exhortation. So.
I like that idea.
Reach out to Shep.
I like that idea.
Yeah, reach out to Shep and get that figured out and get yourself in the Discord over there.
Yeah.
I mean, I'll even stream it if Shep ultimately wants to. I mean, I'll take whatever you present there to us in the Discord, and I can even put it on a stream or upload it or something like that. Okay. There we go.
Wait, is Praise is still? Hang on, I have my laptop.
That's fine. Standing, you can have it here. It's fine. Here, just put it in the side chat. There you go.
All right, Miss Ho R has a confession. I think Boki, you're the winner.
Yes! Yes!
That's funny.
Oh, that is worth more than 10 Miss Universes who were all winners back in their days. That is a whole lot more. That is one big validation I was looking for. Yeah, shameless plug right here, but damn am I happy. Sway, you just made my afternoon.
You'll never have hair as nice as mine, just saying.
I know, but I don't care about that.
That the more drunk she gets, the hotter you look, Kenny.
Hey, that's the same thing.
Yes,
I did not say that.
To me.
Your attractiveness is directly proportionate to the level of intoxication of the opposite sex. I hope that doesn't insult you.
No, not at all, because that's been the story of my life. You know how snockered I have to get Tammy just to kiss me?
I imagine.
Oh my gosh. Kenny,
I watched an interesting movie today on Hulu. It was called Villains.
mhm.
I don't know if anyone saw it. Kind of a, I mean, it's not like an A-list movie or anything. The talent was good though. Had Alexander Skarsgård, who played, It in the recent adaptation, Stephen King's It. And he was playing a kid with his girlfriend, and they were basically kind of a Bonnie and Clyde type situation. And the movie starts with them basically robbing a liquor store gas station, right? Robbing a gas station, almost in a comically, failing, affair. And then they start driving away, only to realize that they ran out of gas after they had just robbed a gas station. So it's kind of hilarious. But they end up kind of in the middle of nowhere, out in the woods, and they happen to see a mailbox, nearby. So their intention is to go to the house and break in and steal the car that's there. No one's home. So they break in, they jimmy rig in, they start looking for the keys for the car. They go down in the basement and they find a little girl chained up. And so they figure that they're going to rescue her.
Hey, Smoke Man, Standing's waiting for the link or something like that.
I just posted it in side chat. It's right there. You can grab it.
Okay. He said something about email or whatever, but anyway.
Well, it's right there. It's in the side chat. If he needs it emailed, I'll email it, but it's right there in the side chat. And just click on it. So anyway, so they're in the house, and then the people come back, and it turns out that they're absolutely crazy psychopaths. And so now the people that were breaking in to basically steal things end up being the victims of a horrendous, series of unfortunate events. And it actually was a pretty great movie. It's a rare thing to. Alexander Skarsgård is an outrageously talented actor, pretty much in any role. He fits. He's quite a pleasure to watch, pretty much in any context or any performance he's ever been in that I've ever seen. Certainly, even his brother. I forget his brother's name. It's from that. He was in the show True Blood. I forget his name off the top of my head. He's going to be in that new movie coming up. But if you guys haven't seen it, it's on Hulu. I highly recommend it. Well, hello, Standing. Welcome,
gentlemen. Good to be here. To start off on a lighter note, before we get into the heat
Gentlemen
battle,
and
as
Boki.
one could say.
Well, no, Boki's gonna go out. Boki, we're gonna bid you adieu because we're gonna do this and have the room structured for it. So here we're gonna have Kenny there.
Yeah,
I was hoping to
47.
I was hoping to have Boki here to cheer me on.
Well, you can. Well, I mean, if you really want to,
Just
room, I mean, I can.
Boki ain't gonna be cheering me on, that's for sure.
Well, he might. I mean, if you make good enough of an argument. I mean.
On a lighter note, before we let the fun begin, I have seen that movie Villains, so there's something we have in common. It's a good movie.
I really enjoyed it today, actually. Yeah, it was a good movie.
Yeah, it's a funny movie.
Yeah.
Okay, so
you want to share your screen, feel free. That's totally fine. And by the way, take as long as you want. You don't need a time limit. Just because I want to hear it in full context. I don't want you to feel rushed. I want you to feel that you can put out as much information as you want. No time limit. I probably only need about, I think, 5 minutes to get what I need. But feel free to put as much context or as much depth into what you present as possible and take your time. Feel free.
Okay. That being the case, then, do you want to do? If I'm going to go first, why don't we give me the affirmative? And in light of, I guess, what I've heard you say on the topic of genetic entropy, why don't we do, and I'll put it in the side chat. Mm-hmm. And when I upload it on my channel, I'll just clip it at this part, you know, where the 1
hour, 33 minutes. Yep, sure. No problem.
Why don't we title it to give me the affirmative?
Well, can I clarify my position just really quick? Because of course we're two Christians here. We're not some atheist, Christian debate. So so we could be clear, I'm not denying that genetic entropy exists. What I'm denying is the extrapolation of time frames that come from the argument for the young Earth perspective. Just to be clear, does that compromise the title at all?
I was going to recommend, is genetic entropy scientifically plausible? So if you're going to concede that there is some type of genetic entropy,
Oh yeah, I would concede that. I'm just saying my disagreement is with the extrapolation of time frames for the young Earth model. I do concede that the genome is breaking down. In fact, I have to, because it's basically part of the concessions that you end up presenting in your argument. So I'm not saying it doesn't exist. I'm just saying it's not within the realm of, I would say, quickness or uniformitarianism as it's presented in the young Earth model. That's really where I'm coming from.
Okay, so how about we do this then? Does genetic entropy better support the young Earth creation model or the old Earth creation model?
I think that's, well, I mean, it supports both. So, it does really support both. So,
Okay,
I mean,
how about this? Does genetic entropy put shelf lives on genomes? Because I would say genetic entropy in and of itself,
well, I concede that
puts
too.
shelf lives on
I
genomes.
concede that too.
Well, what do you okay, so it's your position. It's your position that genetic entropy exists,
Right?
but species can persist for longer than, let's say, 10,000 years, even in light of genetic entropy.
Yeah, I would like to, if we could, kind of primarily allocate it to the human species. Is that via chromosomal Adam, mitochondrial Eve, that kind of idea, that those extrapolations lead to what do you say, like 6,000 years? Is that kind of what the number you go off of?
Well, I wouldn't. There's kind of a difference between the concept of genetic entropy and the concept of mitochondrial Eve and Y chromosome Noah. They're two separate arguments.
Okay.
Hey, Standing, could you explain, especially for me, because I know nothing about what you guys are talking about, what is, just a synopsis, what is the argument of genetic entropy from the young Earther?
Has a good recommendation. She says, does genetic entropy force a young Earth? How do you feel about that?
Yeah. Okay. That would put me in the affirmative. You would confidently deny that thesis. So I'm happy with that.
Okay. All right. That works for me. Okay, cool.
Okay. Why don't we do, so we'll do some openings. I'm sure.
Guys, Smokey, just go ahead and put me in the back. I actually think you guys are mature enough to handle this yourself, and I don't need to police you guys.
That may be true. Okay. That may be true, but for the sake of integrity and
sure. Okay.
Proper. So
okay. Standing, are you okay with that too?
Yeah. No, you know what? Kenny, you make a good moderator. You got a calm, collected voice. Let's leave you as mod, just to have you here, make it more formal anyways.
By the way, Stanley, did you hear Knox thing when he started talking about mitochondrial Eve and Y chromosomal Adam? Did you hear what he said?
If I had to guess, he said mitochondrial Adam and Y chromosome Eve.
He said, oh no, I'm sorry. Yeah. Chromosomal Adam. Sorry. It's late, man. I'm tired.
So, no. I think no, nothing again. I think you said it right there.
Did I say it right? Okay. Well.
Yeah.
Okay. So let me tell you what he said, because you're gonna love this. He said, according to what he had read about mitochondrial Eve and Y chromosomal Adam, that there were no women for 30,000 years in man's history.
Wait a minute. 30,000 years, no women, just men. So how did reproduction take place?
Well, that was what we were all wondering.
Well, maybe we've lost the ability, men that is, to reproduce because of that. I don't know. That's
he actually said it. I'm not kidding. He had a little stream. I think Basement clipped it, where he literally said, "Oh, well, I read up on that. It looks like from the studies I saw, they're saying that no women existed for 30,000 years."
I think he might have been on a parody website.
You know what? He probably was on a real website. It's just his reading comprehension is next to zero. So it could be either way. So anyway, all right. So yeah, I'm fine with that. I'm fine with the title. I do want to hear the argument in its full context. I don't want you to feel rushed. I want you to be able to get out every detail that you feel is essential. What I would say, if it's possible,
Sure.
if you can isolate it or at least make it primary to the species of man,
Okay.
where we're tracking back to Adam and Eve, or even Noah, however you want to parse that out. That would be my preference. I don't mind you bringing up the other animals if it helps you land your point. That's fine. But if we could, for the argument, because that's kind of when we last argued it, that seems to be kind of the central point of focus when we were arguing. So if you could, I'd appreciate it. But you're welcome to bring in as much information as you want.
Okay.
Fair?
I'll stick to genetic entropy and humans. I'll stick to just that. We'll go with stupid whore energy's recommended topic: does genetic entropy force a young Earth? And
Standing, let me correct you there. It's stupid ho or. Yeah, I don't like to call ladies that. So anyway.
Okay.
And I see in the chat, Guru Lady, donate it to charity. There we go.
Well, there you go. Okay. Well, there you go. We'll work something like that. Well, I think that was
no, donate it to needy children, my children.
That was for the debate for soteriology, but we can discuss that later. I do want to crack this one open though, especially for this one, because this is not something I've argued, at least in the realm of science, for many, many a year. And I want to get, I mean, I can't think of anyone probably more knowledgeable on presenting the argument in a debate format than you. So I don't want to waste the opportunity. I want you to get out as much as you can. So fair?
Fair.
Okay.
Fair. I appreciate that. And we
All right,
can
gentlemen, let's get rolling, huh?
Kenny, do you have a clock to be able to at least keep an eye on time? I mean, I'm giving standing.
Yes, I do.
Marks, but
I
just,
do.
Just so
but I mean, if everybody just has an eye, yeah.
Okay. All right. That's cool. Standing, whenever you want to start, you're more than welcome. This is the 1 hour, 40-minute mark for you, just so you know. And whenever you want to share your screen, you can take it away. Mic is yours. Take as long as you want.
Okay. Much appreciated. We can discuss a thesis for something soteriology related after this. So
sounds good to me.
I am going. Okay. So I'm going into this. Is my audio coming in? Okay.
Sounds fine to me. Chat, is Standing's audio good? Please sound off. Let us know. Is he heard well? Let us know real quick. Do you hear him good, Kenny?
Yes. Yeah. Okay. Audible, or the audio is
guys, sound off on sound. Everyone's sound is good. Test. Go ahead and test, Standing.
Okay. Test. I think we're good.
I think we're good. Go ahead, man. Whenever you're ready, hit it up.
Okay, perfect. Get a drink of water here. Get my clock going. And I'll put it on a stopwatch form, and I'll make sure I don't go too long past the 5-minute mark. Okay, here we go. Does genetic entropy force a young Earth? So I'll share screen if you don't mind. And we'll get up some slides here. Okay.
All set. Go ahead. I'll put it on full screen for you. And you're good. Go for it.
Okay. Much appreciated. And let's get into some of the basics of genetic entropy for the audience. Anybody who doesn't understand what genetic entropy is. Genetic entropy is the genetic degeneration of living things. Genetic entropy is the systematic breakdown of the internal biological information systems that make life alive. Genetic entropy results from genetic mutations. And as we will see shortly, if we're going to focus just on humans, although the mutation rate in the nuclear DNA, the Y chromosome, the mitochondrial DNA is generally understood to be fast in all of mammals, at least. And we'll focus on humans for now, for this discussion. And humans specifically, the mutation rate is between 100 and 150 new mutations per person per generation in the autosomal DNA. In the Y chromosome, which is a uniparentally inherited DNA passed down on the father's side, it's about 3 mutations per generation, which is incredibly fast, especially because there's only a few mutations in the Y chromosome separating any 2 people from Y chromosome Noah. specifically. Mutation rate in Y chromosome goes back about 4,500 years. Mitochondrial DNA, it's about one every other generation. And there's only a few mitochondrial DNA differences separating any two people worldwide as well. So with a fast mutation rate in these DNA compartments and the fact that we have low genetic variation, the best conclusion is that these DNA compartments are young. So specifically here, let's focus on what's passed on sperm and egg in the autosomal DNA. Okay. So it's about 100 to 150 new mutations per person per generation that are passed on. That means every single generation is slightly more mutant than the generation before it. And mutations systematically erode the information that encodes life's many essential functions. Here, the mutation rate is roughly 100 new mutations per person per generation. The eight mutation is roughly similar, but we are focusing on humans. Now, the most detrimental aspect to those that would reject genetic entropy, and even I would say those that would reject the fact that genetic entropy points to a young Earth, a young genome more specifically, is that ENCODE, which was a research program in terms of DNA function. The new ENCODE findings reveal that most of the human genome is functional. Hence, most random changes in the genome must be deleterious. So the point is, evolutionists at least, which Smokey's not an evolutionist, they've assumed that the genome is no more than 10 to 20% functional max. And so their main argument to mutation accumulation, low impact deleterious mutation accumulation, is that most of the genome's junk. So these mutations build up in the neutral junk areas of the genome, which means they don't really have any deleterious effects. Well, that's been refuted. We now know that over 90% of the genome is functional. That means most mutations, let's say about 90 per generation, are deleterious. They are harmful to the genomes of living organisms. So this is an important point here. Even the most fit individuals are still more mutant than their parents. So even intense selection against the less fit cannot stop mutation accumulation. Remember, selection is limited. Selection, another way of saying selection is differential reproduction. Who is reproducing the most, okay? Now, the problem is most of these mutations, they're nearly neutral, or as population geneticists put it, effectively neutral, okay? What that means is they're invisible to selection because they're not harmful enough to stop or prevent reproduction, and therefore they are passed on. They go undetected, and so they are then subject to genetic drift. They spread throughout the population. That's why typically I like to point out that every single human being on the planet is multiply mutant. Okay, so even if you were to give the most intense of selection, let's say you were to remove 50% of the worst mutants on the planet, 4 billion people. Okay, fine. That's not realistic, but for sake of argument, let's give it to the critics. So you remove 4 billion people. So let's say we're left with 4 billion people. Unfortunately, that's 4 billion people who are more mutant than the generation before it. So selection, here's a slide I want to go over. We'll take about 2 more minutes here. Why can't selection filter out all the bad mutations? There are 2 reasons. There are too many bad mutations continuously pouring into the population, and B, most bad mutations are too subtle to be selectively removed. Epigenetic mutations will consistently magnify this problem. So the fact of what we understand about this extra layer of complicated information, the epigenome, makes the reality of genetic entropy even more irrefutable. So last couple things I'll go over here, just so I don't go on for too long. I am focusing specifically on humans here, is the artificially contrived rescue mechanisms put forth by the critics to prevent mutation accumulation related degeneration have been systematically analyzed using sophisticated numerical simulations. And these results have been published, as a matter of fact, in secular journals. And the 2 main ones are mutation count mechanism and synergistic epistasis. They've both been falsified. They don't work. As a matter of fact, synergistic epistasis speeds up degeneration, leads to faster extinction. But the problem is every single human being is multiply mutant, so it's not going to help. And of course, as you can see here, number 1, junk DNA. That's their main argument, at least in terms of the evolutionists, that the majority of the genome is neutral junk, and therefore most of these mutations, although they're right, if you notice here, mutation human exceptionalism, so this is perfect in light of what we're discussing here, our future genetic load. This isn't a young earth creationist paper. This is Michael Lynch, well-respected population geneticist. An average newborn carries 100 de novo mutations. So these evolutionists would assume, well, okay, the mutation rate's very high, but most of the genome's junk. That's actually been refuted. Most of the genome is functional. I've even had old earth creationist Dr. Fuzz Rana on the program twice, demonstrating the reality of functional DNA. And so it magnifies the problem, especially for evolutionists. And I would say for old earth creationists who want to be consistent, okay, they have to admit the mutation rate's high, the genome is mostly functional. That means species cannot persist for millions of years into the future. That means they could not have persisted for millions of years into the past. Now, I do want to cover this last slide here, and then I'll call it. We're coming on 8 minutes. Okay, Kimura. This is an important citation here. Under the present model, effectively neutral. So here we go. A lot of critics will say, oh, standing for truth, he's just making up these terms. No, this is Kimura, world famous population geneticist, well respected by evolutionists. Effectively neutral, but in fact, so what's an effectively neutral mutation? Very slightly deleterious mutants accumulate continuously in every species. The rate of loss of fitness per generation may amount to, which is high, whether such a small rate of deterioration in fitness constitutes a threat to the survival and welfare of the species, not the individual, is a moot point, but this will easily be taken care of by adaptive gene substitutions. So here's where I want to make my final point, okay? When you read these papers, the evolutionists that acknowledge the reality of genetic degeneration, they'll look to beneficial mutations. They'll say, well, beneficial mutations can counterbalance the damage. Then we got beneficial mutations, we got synergistic epistasis, mutation count mechanism, we got junk DNA. Well, they've all been refuted. Beneficial mutations actually turn out to be far too rare. It's about 1 in a million. And when you do get a beneficial mutation, when examined, okay, when you look to the genotype, it turns out to be functionally compromising to organisms. It turns out to be reductive. So it turns out beneficial mutations don't even work. And there's 9 minutes. So even though I can talk about this all day, we'll end it there. And the last thing I'll say is, yes, the reality of genetic entropy demands a young earth, unless Smokey can provide a type of selection that can remove so many deleterious mutations that are pouring in to the populations of various creatures from generation to generation. So I guess we'll see if he can provide that. So thank you so much for the time here.
Okay. All right. Beautiful. Would you permit me, as part of my opening, to also just pitch a few queries to you to make sure that I have some clarification of your position, because I don't want to speak presumptuously without. I would actually concede probably most of what you said there, and I wouldn't try to use probably those typical arguments that you brought up that I agree with. I'm actually okay with even conceding that most mutations are indeed actually deleterious, and the majority of the genome is actually functional. Would you concede to that? Some queries as part of my opening?
Definitely, yeah. If you have some queries, go ahead. I'll be writing things down as you're speaking if need be. But of course, yes, go ahead.
Cool. So I guess I'll start here. Between homozygosity and heterozygosity, or I guess to understand, to make it clear, is the concept of the idea of either a high amount of genetic diversity or a low amount of genetic diversity. Do I have that correct?
Yes, heterozygosity would be a state of genetic diversity. Homozygosity would be a state of no genetic diversity.
Right. And yeah, we are, at least as humans exist today, I think you said, generally not very heterozygous. We are more homozygous. We have reached a point where there's very little genetic diversity between basically all the humans currently on Earth. Is that fair?
We are heterozygous. That's why we have kids and they're different. But there are obviously more spots of homozygosity. I think there's probably about 5 million places where we could find DNA differences in humans, which is more than enough to have a variety of children. So, yeah, but we would say Adam and Eve had nothing but, oh no, I should correct that. They would have had pre-existing heterozygosity DNA differences,
Right.
but certainly more than we do today.
Do
Yeah. So
you view Adam and Eve as having like the basically the perfect genome? It didn't have any mutations when they were first created. You'd believe that, right?
right. The DNA differences at creation would not have been the result of mutations over time. They would have been the result of created nuclear heterozygosity, as you're putting it. While some DNA differences today could be due to mutations, but we would say that the majority of them are not.
Gotcha. Okay. I just had the next question in my head. Okay, and do you take the position that basically Adam and Eve would have had a very robust front-loaded genome with all of the genetic diversity of which we see today, Asians, blacks, all of that, like all of that was basically already preloaded in their DNA as they reproduced, and isolated in certain groups, that some of those genetic components kind of filtered down or were focused, that basically Adam and Eve had the mix of all the races kind of in them at the time that they were beginning, that they had a larger or more complex, I'm not sure how to put it, they had a larger genome or a more comprehensive genome than any human on Earth today? Or how do you look at that?
That's a good question. So we would say, I would at least say, because there are different views in the young Earth creationist world on this, I would say that the majority of ethno-linguistic differences that we see today were front-loaded in Adam and Eve. They probably would have been like a middle brown skin. So let's say you're looking at capital A, lowercase a, capital B, lowercase b, in terms of their genetics, in terms of alleles. From there, starting off genetically heterozygous rather than homozygous would be capital A, lowercase a, right?
Right.
Lowercase b. They would essentially have the necessary levels of genetic diversity to produce all the shades of skin today. But one important thing I'll say, Smoke, and I'll let you continue, is the existence of melanin, right? A type of pigment that we know gives color to multiple things, hair, eyes, but skin is an important thing that melanin gives color to. So today, depending on environment, right, you can have more melanin or less melanin. So that might not, or even mutations could result in changes to eyes, skin, and hair. So I'm going to say most was there, but an environment has played a factor since then as well. So I apologize for the long answer. Go ahead.
I appreciate the long answer. Actually, I'd prefer it to be thorough. So that's not a problem, because I do want to get really into the bottom. I'm not trying to misrepresent, straw man, or not understand. I do want to make sure that what I'm presenting is clear cut the way that I'm seeing it. Okay, so that's good. So now, I recall earlier, I'm gonna slightly move into the topic of the Neanderthals, because I've heard you talk about that before, and I think part of that has to do with my basically questioning of the timeline of the genetic entropy in the young Earth model. So. And correct me if anything I'm saying here is wrong. But the way I've heard you present it with the idea of Neanderthals, you do believe the Neanderthals are human. They came from humans. They were isolated genetic groups that were prone to heavy amounts of inbreeding. They had a very, very low amount of genetic diversity amongst them, which actually caused them to have an extremely accelerated mutation rate, which then caused them to basically go into genetic meltdown. Anything I say incorrect there?
So Sorry, I was on mute.
It's okay.
No, yeah, the Neanderthals, we would say, are not a sister species to humans. We would say that they are a side branch that essentially go back to Noah and his family on the ark, and therefore go back to Adam and Eve. Fully human, side branch, but we would say since they were closer to the flood, right? They are an example of ancient man. They would have, for one, started off with a different set of biodiversity. The founder of Neanderthal, since that they would have been closer to the flood, may have had children in their hundreds, which means you'd have more mutations passed on, especially in the Y chromosome. There's something called patriarchal drive. So Neanderthals could have started off with a whole bunch of new mutations, which on a phylogenetic tree could be wrongly assumed as being many generations, even though we're just looking at one generation, right? And we know they're the most inbred people group that ever existed on the planet. Their runs of homozygosity are massive, no matter where you look at them. That's essentially the end stage Neanderthal. But even the evolutionary community would admit that Neanderthals existed in very small populations in a horrible ice age related environment, ecoglacial environments, where it's very dark conditions, meaning you're going to have deficiencies in various vitamins, vitamin D, for example, which could result in mutations to important DNA repair enzymes. DNA repair enzymes are incredibly important. We typically point to the existence of DNA repair enzymes as evidence for a forward thinker, right? But the point is, you get a mutation to an important DNA repair enzyme. That means that lineage will be hypermutating, which means they'll pass on more mutations than normal. Even though the mutation rate is generally fast, you can have a group like Neanderthals where their mutation rate is even faster, which means over time they are becoming more and more genetically divergent from, let's say, other groups of humans on the planet. So yeah, I would say you were pretty accurate there.
Okay. And the next question. So just to put it at like a macro scale, if we were to take, I mean, you do believe like when Adam and Eve were reproducing, they did. Do you think they managed to fill like the whole Earth? Like the whole Earth was populated, right? Like, do you see it that way, or do you kind of see them as kind of staying in that same kind of cradle of life area? How do you kind of view that?
So your question is at creation?
Yeah, at creation up to the flood. Like, were they like, was the Earth filled with humans? Or was it kind of just, was it kind of just located into that cradle of life, Middle East, Garden of Eden, type of area? How do you view that?
Well, most young Earth creationists, I would certainly hold to the pre-flood world being a Rodinia-like supercontinent, with the Pangea like supercontinent being during the flood, during catastrophic plate tectonics. So was that entire supercontinent, one world continent for the most part, inhabited by humans? I don't really know, because there's been various estimates on how many humans existed at the time of the flood, because we know the entire world was violent. Every thought of every man was wicked, which indicates there could have been a lot of violence, a lot of murder. And so we could be looking at a few humans to a lot of humans.
Low life expectancy and quicker generations, like maybe more generations and like a shorter spans of time, maybe.
Yeah, if you had people that were living into their hundreds, that means one family could have dozens and dozens of children, right? So they are going to reproduce quickly, but with the amount of violence closer to the flood, we could be looking at estimates of a lower population, or, depending on the survivability of humans at that time, there could have been more. That Rodinia-like supercontinent, I don't know if the entire continent itself was inhabited. It could have been.
That's fine.
Similar to Babel. Yeah.
Yeah, it's not a huge deal. I was just for the point of clarity for the argument. That's all I was really wanting. So 70% of Pakistan is inbred. They have lots of genetic malformities. Their entire medical system is crashing right now. And it's because they marry their cousins and their sisters and stuff like that. It's part of their culture. It's very gross. It's just what they're doing. They're struggling with a lot of cultural issues and also negativity that's coming from in medical conditions, like actual genetic errors, severe ones, which is causing them to really go through a lot of suffering. and I imagine you're okay with the idea that like pre-Noah, I mean, if people were breeding with their siblings or cousins, the amount of heterozygosity in the population would allow for there to not be a significant amount of mutations to really endanger them, or how do you view that?
That's a good question as well. Inbreeding essentially is the exposing of genetic mistakes within the genome. Okay. It's the hidden reservoir of genetic mistakes being manifested because these genetic mistakes are in recessive form. Now, the thing is, when it comes to the creation event, Adam and Eve, that were front loaded with design diversity, they would not have had any deleterious recessive mutations to come to the forefront. So sure, you could have a generation or two where siblings or close relatives are marrying, right? Without those deleterious recessive mutations that have accumulated, though, we wouldn't find genetic degenerations and diseases manifesting the way we do today, because today there's thousands and thousands of deleterious recessive mutations that can come to the forefront, leading to disease. I don't know if that answers your question.
No, it does. It does. So, I think I remember this being mentioned to me earlier on in my life, that there is a point in the Bible where God draws a line, and he says, from this point, I think it was with Rebecca and Isaac, if memory serves, where God draws a line and says, okay, from this point forward, no more inbreeding, like no more, cousin marrying, no more sibling marrying, like we're done with it. Like God like draws a line, like as in like there's no like real mention of it beforehand that God like was setting a standard for people to not do that. But suddenly we get to like Isaac and Rebecca, and suddenly God's like, okay, enough. Like, do you concede to that, or do you see that different?
Absolutely, because I think it's again an example of the Bible being the inspired word of God. Holy men spake as they're moved by the Holy Ghost, because at that time Moses understood through the inspiration of the Holy Spirit that inbreeding would be incredibly harmful, since we now have many thousands probably at that time of deleterious recessive mutations that could essentially come to the forefront. Because we know, when you look at inbred families today, right, and generally their life expectancy is not very good, and you can get a reflection of the overall aging of the genome by looking at these highly inbred families, because you can see the hidden reservoir of genetic mistakes that have accumulated for thousands of years now being manifested and coming to the forefront, right? There's a more likelihood that you're going to get two of the same alleles rather than, different. Like we were talking about earlier, heterozygous is much more preferable, because you're looking at a state of DNA diversity, where homozygosity, you have no DNA diversity. So if you have a deleterious allele, it's going to come to the forefront. It's going to lead to disease. And at the time of Moses, when he instituted that makes sense. Where in the pre-flood world, it may not have been as big of a problem, at least disease-wise. At the time of Moses, where he was instituting this law, it definitely would have been a problem. In the same way, it's a problem today.
Beautiful. I think I pretty much have one more question, and I think I can kind of just present the meat of my perspective and argument. Thank you for explaining all of that and being so clear. Here's what I'm seeing. So between Adam and Eve and Noah, there was a lot of course, procreation, and people, basically leading to many, many people on earth and many generations. And they were very wicked. That's fine, perfectly. So Adam and Eve had filtered their genetic makeup down into multiple generations, many different generations leading up to the time of Noah. And so then Noah is basically the only of 8 that is saved from the flood. It's just him and his family. So he is just one slice of the pie of all of the genetic entropy that exists. I mean, not genetic entropy, sorry. all of the genetic diversity that was available prior to the flood. Noah was representing a tiny sliver. He was we know from the genealogy, he was a direct descendant from Adam. We have his genealogy. He wasn't perverted with the bloodlines of the Nephilim. He was perfect in his generations, as it says. So he was genetically pristine. He had not been tainted by any of the Nephilim nonsense that was going on at that time. But then what happens is that Noah is now basically a bottleneck point. So Adam and Eve, all of their descendants had all of this genetic diversity amongst them, probably very heterozygous, because they're representing all of the diversity that initially came from the front-loaded genomes of Adam and Eve. So then we get to Noah and we have a bottleneck where now all of the genetic, and tell me if at any point you disagree with this, all of the genetic diversity, all that other genetic diversity was basically just wiped off the planet. And now we're kind of starting over with a much more, not watered down, how do I say, well, just a bottlenecked genome. It's not, excuse me, it's not representative of what like Adam and Eve had at the time. So now there was going to be from Adam and Eve now down to Noah, a significant shift between a very heterozygous population to a much more homozygous population. Is anything I said there inaccurate?
No, these are some good points. I would say there are some very subtle inaccuracies, and these are some great points you're bringing up, which is going to make for some very interesting responses from myself, but I don't want to respond in great detail yet until you're finished. But I understand the points you're making, at least. I just think there's a couple flaws there that I can point on in a bit when you're done.
Okay. All right. Well, no, I just wanted to make sure I'm at least kind of mostly hitting the mark. And I might not even be using the right terms. Again, this isn't something I study regularly. So if at any point you do feel I'm making a massive error, feel free to correct me. So here's how I'm looking at it. Then I think now I can kind of get to kind of the main point of my argument. One more question. I'll ask one more question, and just to make sure I'm clear on this, and then I'll give you the meat of it, and let you respond. Take as much time as you want. If the way that you calculate through genetic entropy that mankind is 6-ish thousand years old. Do you say 6 or do you say 10? What do you usually say? I'm just curious.
I would confidently say between 6 and 7.
Okay, 6 and 7. Okay. So and the way that you calculate that, and correct me if I'm wrong, because this is how I understand it, but if I'm wrong, tell me, that you look at the current mutation rates as they exist today, and you extrapolate them backwards in a uniform expectation, as in the mutations that we have today have basically been static, that it's been the same amount of, I'm sorry, oh gosh, my brain. It's basically been the same rate of mutations or the same number of mutations per generation, stretching all the way back to Adam and Eve. Am I off on that?
Good question. So it would depend on what DNA compartment we're looking at. So for the most part, when it comes to the mitochondrial DNA compartment, which is uniparentally inherited DNA, what that means is it's just passed down from one parent, right?
We get our mother, right? Yeah,
right.
Sure.
So uni rather than biparentally inherited DNA, which we get 2 copies, one from mom, one from dad,
Sure.
right?
Sure.
The Y chromosome is also uniparentally inherited DNA. So it's less messy because you don't, for the most part, have recombination, which essentially is genetic shuffling of DNA differences from generation to generation. Okay. So the mutation rates in the Y chromosome and mitochondrial DNA compartment, we could safely say the differences are due to mutation. So yeah, we can look at a mutation rate today, see that it's fast, and then look at the amount of variation that exists within people and determine more or less a time frame. But when it comes to the biparentally inherited DNA, that's more difficult because, and that's where we get the 100 new mutations per person per generation when it comes to genetic entropy. We get that in the biparentally inherited DNA. And it's more difficult there because there's recombination, there's gene conversion, it's more messy, there's scrambling. And as a creationist, we look to the majority of DNA diversity in biparentally inherited DNA as created heterozygosity. That's why the mitochondrial DNA and Y chromosome DNA compartments, that's why those are the best to look at, because the differences we see there, we as creationists, we can agree with the evolutionists. Yeah, what we're looking at there is probably due to mutation. So I hope that helps answer.
No, it does. Yeah, no, it does actually. So, okay, so now I think I'm pretty clear. So now I'll just give you the substance of at least my argument or the problem I see with the backwards extrapolation, at least as I can tell. When a extinction event happens, like the flood, or let's say like a genocide, a whole bunch of the population is wiped out. All of that genetic diversity of that group is now eliminated from the population. Like, though they're never going to have descendants from that group. If the Canaanites were wiped out or the Amalekites were wiped out, now that group of genetically diverse individuals will no longer be a part of the genome of all of the descendants of Earth as it continues down the generations. So we have a continual ongoing bottlenecking, a removal of basically what is a higher amount of genetic diversity to a much lower amount of genetic diversity. We go from being primarily more heterozygous to being primarily more homozygous. And as we continue to be more homozygous, we actually increase the mutation rate, the same way that happened with the Neanderthals, as they had less access to more genetic information or more genetic differences. Sorry, then that would lead to a different mutation rate. We would have a faster mutation rate today because as we have gone through, and I don't know if you heard, there's one of these princes or rulers, and they found out something crazy, that like a massive chunk of an entire country is basically related to this one ancient ruler because, well, what did he do? He did a bunch of raping and pillaging all over the place. He was a very successful reproducer. Right. So he was one of the primaries, and that's another bottleneck opportunity. That's where, many generations or many other individuals who possessed a different, more diverse genome were basically taken out of the equation of the population, which then continues to push us further and further. As we descend further and further down the generations, we actually have less and less and less genetic diversity between the humans, which would also increase the mutation rate. I think potentially in some ways even exponentially, which means that I would find it, in my mind, a big challenge to be able to adequately and accurately anticipate that today's current rate of mutations or number of mutations is somehow static, stretching back in time, because we've had multiple opportunities of bottleneck scenarios where massive chunks of human genetic diversity was basically just taken off the table for any subsequent generations. And as we have an increase from heterozygosity to homozygosity of less genetic deviation or less genetic differences, then we would have an increased mutation rate. And if that proceeds and less people are passing on their genetic diversity to the next generation, we will have a continual increase and rapidity to the accumulation of mutations, which would ultimately push humanity at some point here into genetic meltdown. That's basically the substance of my argument, which, if that is true, then I don't think the expectations or the claims of the young Earth model can actually stand the test of certainty that is presented. Feel free to respond. I yield.
Okay, those are some really good points, actually, and I look forward to discussing them, because a lot of these points you're bringing up are points that allow us to really get into the meat and potatoes of this discussion rather than the basics. So I do applaud you.
It's different arguing with a Christian than one of the evolutionists.
Well, it's definitely applaud worthy that you've looked into this and researched it enough.
I really haven't. I just really have listened to what you've said. That's all. I haven't. I honestly, this is not something I spend. But you're my teacher on this, actually, Standing. I don't mean to, blow smoke up your ass. But honestly, I don't want to go to just regular secular sources or sites to kind of just do the research for what your arguments are. I want to hear it from you. And so really I've just been paying attention to what you've been saying. So this is to your benefit, just so you know. But please take as long as you want and respond and see if you can give any clarity on that for me.
Okay. I appreciate that. And let's, I guess, consider that the two opening statements, which you had some clarifying questions, which is great.
Sounds good for me.
We understand.
Sure. Absolutely.
Why don't we do, let's say roughly 5-minute rebuttals.
Sure. I'm fine with that.
Responses, right? This is more laid back.
No problem.
And once I see myself getting to the 5-minute mark here, because these are some points that I could certainly talk about all day. So once I get to the 5-minute mark, I'll start winding down, and we'll give it to you. And then if you have questions for your time, that's completely fine.
Sounds good to me.
Okay, so here we go. First thing I want to say, again, especially for the audience sake, because I understand a lot of this can be technical, is that there are going to be different responses based on whether or not we're looking at, let's say, the autosomal DNA or the uniparentally inherited DNA. Or, for example, we have autosomal chromosomes, right? And we have the sex chromosomes. So since we're specifically discussing humans have 22 pairs of autosomes and 1 pair of sex chromosomes, right? The X chromosome and the Y chromosome. So what's important to understand from this is the mitochondrial DNA and the Y chromosome. Okay, we're going to find a difference in terms of the diversity that's lost at the flood than if we're just looking at the biparentally inherited DNA. And that's what I want to focus on first, is the biparentally inherited DNA, because that most applies to this concept of genetic entropy. That's where we're inheriting the 100 new mutations per person per generation. Okay. So the question is, out of the autosomal DNA, let's say the question is, how do we determine what is a created DNA variant and what is the result of mutations, for one? Okay. So firstly, we've gone about this by looking to common variants versus rare variants and disease causing variants versus non-disease causing variants. Okay. Because if God front loaded Adam and Eve with this pre-existing nuclear heterozygosity, specifically pertaining to the biparentally DNA, okay, inherited DNA, then we can assume that these variants are not going to be disease causing, and they are going to be more common because they're all front loaded at creation, right? And we can actually look today, we can look to DNA diversity worldwide, and it turns out that most people, we talked about this earlier, have between 3 million and 5 million DNA differences. Okay, that means we're heterozygous at about that many positions. And there are only about, I think worldwide, close to 10 million common variants. Okay, so the point I'm trying to make is, in response to what Smokey said, yes, at the flood bottleneck, we have a reduction of the human population to 8 people. Okay. So we have about 1,600 years since creation and the flood. For one, meaning very little deleterious mutation accumulation, especially got the pristine genomes, a better environment. Okay. And at the flood, mutation load would be minimal. After the flood, we see a drastic decrease in age. And we also know that environment can certainly affect deleterious mutation accumulation and inbreeding would accelerate that. Okay. So the point is, at the flood, you could essentially lose, let's say, 10 million variants because it's a bottleneck, right? But we know from scripture that it's a one generation bottleneck that's followed up with rapid and exponential population growth. Okay. So let's say hypothetically God front loaded Adam with 20 million DNA variants. We could actually have half of those being lost at the flood bottleneck and then left with 10 million DNA variants today. And we could still explain DNA diversity worldwide, as in it wouldn't be an issue because worldwide we see there are roughly 10 million common variants. And again, we can look at which ones are disease causing, which ones are rare versus which ones are common. Okay, but the mutation rate, and one clarifying question, Smokey, because I wrote a lot down and I'm trying to
Sure.
you said the mutation rate is faster today. You from your position, you'd say it's faster today.
Correct. I would say it's faster today. Yes, correct. Yeah.
Okay. So if it's faster today, let's say in these DNA compartments, we would have to consider. I'm looking at everything I wrote down. Okay. For one, we'd have to consider the I've spoken on this a lot. It's called recombination hotspots. Okay, so we have a gene that actually it's called the PRDM9 gene, and it assists in recombination. And some people groups on the planet actually have more of these sites than others. For example, Africans are able to harbor more genetic diversity than non-Africans. They actually have more of these PRDM9 sites, which means take that back in time. We know mutations can destroy these sites. So again, at creation with Adam and Eve, you would have more of these sites and therefore more recombination, more effective recombination. Okay. But you've also got an environment that is more pristine. So I would say less deleterious mutations accumulating, but at the same time, there's something else to consider. We talked about it earlier, where you'd have patriarchal drive and matriarchal drive. Okay, specifically patriarchal drive. If you have men that are living into the hundreds, right, hundreds of years old, that means they are going to have more mutations that are passed on from generation to generation. Now, again, in the pre-flood world versus the post-flood world, some of those mutations may not be as deleterious as they are today, especially if you're closer to the creation event. You have Adam and Eve who are created without any mutations, without deleterious mutations. Over time, they build up. After the flood, they start to build up exponentially. But one thing I want to mention, we discussed this before, is the genetics boundary study. And for sake of time, I won't screen share, but I do got a lot of the citations from it in front of me.
If you want, I don't mind. It's up to you.
Okay. Maybe in a minute, but I'll just end it with this because I look like coming at 6 minutes. The genetics boundary study has shown that essentially the mitochondrial DNA was reset, okay, for the most part at the flood, because we have this bottleneck and we have this new genetic boundary study that has come out from the secular literature that shows that over 90% of species today, Smoke, I think you know what I'm talking about, over 90% of species today originated at the same time. Okay. And this is because there's low genetic diversity in this specific marker that they look at in the mitochondrial DNA. It's called the CO1 gene, and it's through barcoding analyses. They've realized there's low genetic diversity in that CO1 gene. It's a highly conserved mitochondrial gene. And so the researchers said, wow, it looks like 90% of species originated at the same time, which from our model, we would say, yeah, at the flood, there was a flood bottleneck. Essentially, that DNA compartment was reset. Okay, that's a DNA compartment that's way smaller than your biparentally inherited DNA. And given the fact that you have low genetic diversity, that means hundreds of thousands of years could not have passed, or else mutations that add genetic diversity from generation to generation would add more diversity than what we see. Humans overall have low genetic diversity, and whatever DNA compartment you look at, you're looking at low low genetic variation. But the last thing I'll say is, even if you do have a slower mutation rate, there's a lot of factors to consider. Okay. So I don't think we can determine what a mutation rate was in the pre-flood world, especially when people were living hundreds of years old. But let's just say it was slower for 1600 years, which I would say is accurate. And therefore it's faster today. We still have to remember that we have low genetic diversity in general. So low genetic diversity with a fast mutation rate still really only takes us back a few thousand years, even with a slower mutation rate in the flood, because we're only saying that like, let's say the Y chromosome, for example, we're saying that only goes back 4,500 years to the flood anyways, to Noah, Y chromosomal Noah. So we're not really accounting for the time from Adam to Noah. We're looking to the time from now till Noah, which is about 4,500 years. 3 mutations per generation in the Y chromosome. I think max there's about 300 Y chromosomal DNA differences between any two people. I mean, do the math, right? It doesn't take long to accumulate 300 mutations. But I'll end it there. I'm sure you have a lot of clarifying questions there. So why don't we just end it there, and
Sure.
we'll hand it to you.
Sure. Appreciate it. Yeah, no, thank you for all of that. I think that kind of that is kind of, I think, where I was going. I like some of the points that you were saying, with where I was kind of trying to go with in terms of this argument is that for the extrapolation back to, this will only take me a couple minutes, for the extrapolation back to like 6,000 to 7,000 years. As you said, there's lots of factors that are difficult to fully account for. Recombination, like, say, for instance, I don't know, maybe I'm not even using the term correctly, but like a population is semi-isolated or separated maybe from the grander population, and then reintegrates its way back in. So that population had maybe an accelerated mutation rate for a period of time until their generations reincorporated back into, the larger population. So there could have been stacked up accelerated mutations in that isolated population, but then would slow again once, though, the members of that group that passed on its genes worked back into the main population. And so my point, to take your concessions and points that you said, is that inside the extrapolations backwards for the young Earth model, there's quite a few difficult to account for considerations. As you said, there's, genetic diseases even can be something that could increase or change, the mutation rate. And that based upon what the human population is doing or choosing to do, or where they're going or who they're breeding with, there could be a different variation at speed or rate or amount of mutation rates. And if we're talking about pre-flood, with a much healthier, more complete genome spread out across the population, those mutation rates would be hard to predict with all of the available potential variables that could affect the mutation rates. Do you agree or disagree with any of that?
Yes. And if I could add one thing, the factors that we have to consider that I brought up, like recombination rates and specifically patriarchal drive. Okay. And if I could say this, and then of course, take as much time as you need,
Sure.
is if patriarchal drive is a bigger factor than some may assume, then the mutation rate may have actually been even higher in the past, because, and especially for the audience sake, since there's a lot of technical jargon here, patriarchal drive from the young Earth creationist perspective, and maybe the old Earth creationist perspective, if you would hold to humans in the pre-flood world living hundreds of years, right? Sure. That means really old people having children late in their lives would obviously, right? This is pretty basic. That would mean if you're living longer, you're accumulating more mutations.
Sure.
Okay. Because men specifically, Smokey, in our reproductive cells, they start dividing at puberty, but they actually don't stop dividing until we die. So we can actually have children later in life. Okay. as compared to women. Obviously, it's a lot more difficult.
Sure.
So let's say you have Noah, who's living hundreds of years old, or early biblical patriarchs in the pre-flood world. Okay, they have children at a later age. They've accumulated a ton of mutations in their reproductive cells, and they produce children, and those children are hit, bam, with a whole bunch of new mutations. Well, that means if we were to look at a phylogenetic tree, which after you're done, your response here, I can screen share for you and the audience.
Sure.
You can ask questions.
Actually, I'll be ready for my closing statement after you're done, and then you can close. You can actually have the final word. Go ahead.
Okay. So that would mean that factor alone could indicate that the mutation rate, at least in the Y chromosome, would be faster in the pre-flood world. Okay. So on a phylogenetic tree, you could have a branch length. Okay. When you look at these trees that I usually share, they're like these, they've got these branching patterns, right? So if you have a really long branch, let's say in the Y chromosome, that could actually be due to one generation that's been hit with a whole ton of new mutations based on patriarchal drive. So that's just one factor to consider that I think is important in this debate, because if that's a big factor in all of this, then there could have been even more mutations being passed on, even in the pre-flood world. So anyways, go ahead, take your time.
Sure. Yeah, it won't take long. I'll give my closing statement now. I think I have it pretty much clear. And then if you want to share your screen, give your closing statement, do whatever you want to do. So thank you for that. And I think actually what you nailed it at is exactly where maybe the point of disagreement would end up being between our two models. Like it's almost like where we would have to have a completely different debate to settle this one thing before we would even be able to clarify further. And I like how you said that. You made it simple because you're talking about, well, if we could, basically assume that mankind was living hundreds of years, then we could have the justification for still maintaining these faster mutation rates, like what we see today still existing back then, even though they had a much greater amount of genetic diversity. But see, again, this is where our two models tend to diverge. In my model, I don't hold to that idea of mankind really living hundreds of years. I am expecting a longer lifespan because of a healthier genetic code or a more complete genome or a more access to the original, source, created heterozygosity that God gave humankind. That there's a good reason to believe that they lived a bit longer. I have no issue with that. But in the hundreds of years, this is where our two models will diverge. Now, your model will integrate out of the idea of mankind living hundreds of years. Mine will look at it more of them being, a little bit longer probably than what humans live at today. And if that was true, then from my model, we would still expect from that view for there to be less mutation rates or less accelerated mutation rates than what we see today because of the amount of genetic diversity available in the population and the breeding. But for you, of course, if you can allow for humans having children far, far later in life, hundreds of years later, you can attribute those stacked up mutations inside the reproductive cells to basically compensate where there would be less mutations because of the strength of the genetic diversity. You can compensate and you can say, well, but if they were breeding later in life, that compensates for that and would still maintain an increase in mutations. And I think that's where our two models split in this disagreement for the justifications from my view, and then for yours, where your model attributes that and allows for it, which then would justify those increased rates. So the one pushback I would have with that is kind of leading into my final point and my closing statement here is basically that I think that is a bit of a hard line assumption on the young Earth side of the young Earth model that even is adequate enough of a compensation to allow for or to anticipate a similar amount of increased mutation rates as we currently see today. That just as we had said earlier. No, go ahead if you want to say something.
Yeah, just one clarifying question. Would you then assume the same as me, that our ancestors' genome size would have had millions more DNA base pair? Essentially, the genome size of our ancestors, our early ancestors, after
Yes,
creation, they would have had larger genomes,
yes,
right?
yes, that is what I'm conceding. Yes, absolutely. Yeah.
So wouldn't that mean more positions in the genome to be hit with mutations than today if we have smaller genomes?
Wait, ask that one more time.
If we have smaller genomes today, like we've lost a lot of our genome size,
Right.
and we'll specifically focus on humans, but also
Sure.
you could look to animals too.
Sure.
Then in the pre-flood world, let's say our early ancestors had larger genomes, which then by definition, we've lost a lot of genes since then, including a lot of functional genes. Wouldn't that mean more positions in the genome then to be hit with mutations?
Yes, but I would also argue that even in that instance, the strength of the genome would basically mean that either they may be neutral, or even if they're deleterious, it's happening in such a large genome that it doesn't have the perceivable effect that we would today. So, because like what you say, like how mutations stack, right? So like you have so many mutations that you have in your life, in your generation, you being passed on from your parents. Now, those will stack in a, I don't want to say exponential. Maybe that is the right word. I'm not sure. But your dad's mutations stack onto your mutations, which then stack onto your kids' mutations. And there's just this kind of continual, almost, for lack of a better word, exponential increase as time goes by of the amount of mutations or the amount of potential mutations. Is any of that off?
No, but my issue is, and tell me what your thoughts are on this, is even if we were to grant a slower rate and a more pristine genome, if you have essentially a mutation is a typographical error in a text, okay? So even if there's a slower rate, but although I'm apt to say there's a higher rate if patriarchal drive is true, but you don't necessarily hold to patriarchal drive, although I do believe there's some good evidence for it. Let's say, for sake of argument, okay, you have a slower mutation rate. Let's focus on the Y chromosome, for example, okay? In the past, in the pre-flood world, today it's about 3 per generation. Let's say it's about 1 per generation in the pre-flood world. Okay, for one, a typographical error in a text, so even in the pre-flood world, if it hits a functional gene, it can really only a functional gene can't get any better. Okay, so it's still going to be degenerative in some way, like the population geneticists say,
I'm fine with
effectively
it being,
neutral.
yeah. And by the way, I'm fully fine with all of that you said in your opening, that most of the genome is functional, that most mutations are deleterious. I have no issue with any of that. My stance was that there's lots of variables that I think, in terms of a macro or a collective consideration, are hard to completely account for. One of which is exactly what we're discussing exactly right now, which is its relationship to the size of the genome, and whether or not that really ultimately has the same effect. Because if they had a larger genome, the idea is that perhaps that there's not an expectation of an accumulation or a lot of mutations actually necessarily happening between each generation. Because like when you get to Pakistan, again, I'm bringing up Pakistan again for like the cousin marriage and stuff like that, they have such a low amount of genetic diversity between the couples that basically they are replicating very, very, similar genomes. They're stacking on top of each other because of a lack of genetic diversity, at least a lot of genetic errors. It's a massive, very, very quick, like singular generation increase of extremely dangerous, extremely deleterious mutations because of that lack of diversity. We have a larger
Like the
genome.
Neanderthals.
Right, exactly. So if we have like a larger genome, more genetic information available, and there's less of that opportunity of that type of stacking that occurs when you get people who are closer related to each other breeding, is that today, like we have, what is it? So much of pretty much all the population has some type of Neanderthal DNA in it, right? So
Right.
like, yeah, so like those stacked, very, very hyper mutated bloodlines got basically combined into the population that was far more genetically diverse and healthy, larger genomes, more information. The Neanderthal had less information to work with in their genome. So when they started inbreeding, that was stacking much more exponentially and causing more issues, which led to their, genetic.
Well, the early Neanderthal, let's say if it was Homo heidelbergensis, okay, which could be because when we look into the genetics of Neanderthals today, if you know what, especially for audience sake, and this has been fun, so I don't mind going for a little bit longer. If you can share my screen, I'm going to put this up.
Sure.
And I'm curious just to ask you a couple questions on this based on what you're saying, because you're making some interesting points. So, firstly, the early Neanderthal would have been less inbred than the late stage Neanderthal, right? Because when we look to the genetic data of Neanderthal, that shows it was 40% less fit than modern humans. It shows that it was highly, highly inbred. You have these massive runs of homozygosity. That's the most inbred Neanderthal. That's the Neanderthal that was driven essentially into near extinction. But let's say your founder of Neanderthal or your early Neanderthal, they would have still been closer to the flood. They would have had more of a pristine genome than the later Neanderthal. So yeah, they would be a side branch that moves off from the main population, becomes isolated from the main population, and over time they accumulate massive amounts of deleterious mutations. And because they're in a small population, this is where I debated Dr. Dan Stern-Cardinal, because the evolutionists likes to say, well, how can Neanderthals go back to Adam and Eve? Because they have differences in terms of DNA markers, as in, there's differences in Neanderthals that humans don't have and modern humans, and differences in modern humans that Neanderthals don't have. So why are we different than the Neanderthals? Neanderthals are about 99.7% different than us. Well, if you have a small population like the Neanderthals, they have a high mutation rate and they're highly inbred. That means you also have something called fixation. Fixation means to just get stuck in place. Okay, all populations have fixed differences. We have fixed differences to the chimpanzee, for example. What that means is you're going to have rapid fixation of new deleterious mutations, which explains the genetic markers in Neanderthals that are not found in humans. Because for a time there, and I think that probably makes sense, you'd have these mutations that come to the forefront or that are accumulated. We have a small population, so bam, it's fixed in that population, right? It's passed on to everybody. Because it's a smaller population. Today, there's 7 billion people on the planet. So when I pass on a mutation to my daughter or my son, well, chances are that's not going to become fixed in the population, right? How's that going to happen? It's probably just going to be lost at some point. But the point I'm trying to make is, and since we're talking specifically about Neanderthals, why don't we look at the Y chromosome family tree, okay? So here's the thing. The Y chromosome mutates, Smokey, about 3 new mutations per person per generation, okay? There's really only a few hundred mutations that separate any 2 people. Now, if you look at the branching patterns, you actually have some groups where you have different sizes in their branch lengths, because you have, as you were pointing out, you have some people that pick up more mutations in the same amount of time, more mutations than their cousins. And the point that I'm trying to make is, even with your side branches, like the Neanderthals, we're still looking at DNA diversity worldwide. You actually don't even have Neanderthals in here. Your longest branches here are Africans, right? They have the most diversity. Africans have more diversity than non-Africans. So you don't even have Neanderthals here. They're just a side branch. They pretty much inbred themselves into extinction, right? So they're not even here. So I guess my question to you, and I just want to understand your model better. You are making some good points, and that's why this is an interesting discussion, is if there's really only a few DNA differences here in the Y chromosome, but we have a mutation rate that's 3 per generation. Okay, so we take this back to the flood, Noah. All of this, for the most part, just fits in to the flood with Noah. If most of it was lost at the flood anyways, a flood bottleneck, right? A lot of diversity would be lost.
Right.
How do you, so I guess my question, to make it simple, from your model, how would you put this DNA compartment, the Y chromosome, which has incredibly low variation, but the mutation rate is 3 per person per generation. So even if that was slower in the past, before Noah,
sure,
that's kind of a moot point because we're only taking it back to Noah anyways. So how would you fit this any further than, let's say, 4,000 to 5,000 years? And go ahead, take your time.
Well, can you ask the question just one more time? I want to make sure I'm getting it correctly. Go ahead, if you could, if you don't mind.
Yes. So our model would suggest that Y chromosome Adam, because remember, it's the evolutionists that coined the term, right? Tongue in cheek, Y chromosome Adam.
Yeah.
From the biblical perspective, we actually understand that our last Y chromosomal ancestor is who?
That would be Noah.
It'd be Noah, right? Because that's where the bottleneck was.
Correct.
So really, we're only taking this back to the flood about 4,500 years. So my point is, if we only have a few hundred DNA differences in the Y chromosome between any two people worldwide, okay, and your max is with Africans. Africans, we know there's a lot of different factors that play there. The point is, and the question that I'm trying to ask is, if this only goes back 4,500 years to our last Y chromosomal ancestor, which is Noah, but the Y chromosome mutation rate today is really fast, about 3 per person per generation.
Sure.
But you only have, let's say, 300 to 400 DNA differences max. Well, it doesn't take that long to accumulate those. Okay. And so how does this go back any further than, well, I guess it depends on you. Where would you put Noah? Would you put Noah 200,000 years ago?
Yeah, that's where it gets, that's where it actually does get sticky. I mean, I don't have, honestly, I would have to go back and really kind of look at a couple of the synergizing of the other models, both biological and biblical, to really give you probably a clean answer on that. I'd probably have to get back to you on it more on that one. But this is, I would look at it, if I give you a short answer now, before I've really gone back and looked into it a little bit more, what I would say is that at the time that Noah gets off the ark and he has his 3 sons, they have now basically split off in those 3s from Noah, who had a far more, not far more, but a more complete genome, or a genome with, I guess, higher level of integrity. Now they isolate from each other. They go off on their own genetic trees. They will have their own factors affecting their mutation rates, basically, essentially. So to me, if I'm looking at it through, again, I'd have to go back and look at it and make sure I'm giving you a right number. I don't want to just throw a number out there. But and I know this is, now we're getting into this level where almost I should know in order to even respond to this accurately. But I don't have a number to give you to say, because here's what I'm saying. It just I wouldn't have a number, and the reason I wouldn't have a number is I would be saying that I almost think we can't necessarily have one, at least with any level of severe accuracy, because of the amount of potential factors that could affect that rate of mutation. As we discussed just previously, genetic diseases, environmental issues, genocides, parts of the tree that are being wiped out by murder or plague or famine or anything like that. Those groups get removed from the opportunity of genetic diversity. And with them being removed, they're no longer contributing to the overall integrity of mankind's genome as a whole. as a whole collectively. And so that is leaving these groups, these much like the Neanderthals, it's leaving these trees that are kind of basically isolating themselves from the rest of humanity, and in doing so will not have the same level of expected mutation rate as the rest of humanity, even modern today. And well, then you would say, well, what is it? How do you extrapolate it? And that's kind of my whole argument, is that I'm not believing we necessarily can. And if we get a range, it would be a much larger one than kind of what I think the young earthers tend to present.
But if I could, Smokey,
Sure.
just a little bit of pushback. It looks like people are enjoying this, so I don't mind keeping this going a little longer. Here's the thing.
Well, we can wrap it up soon too. And by the way, I'm tired and my voice is actually really kind of sore. I'm not used to humidity. I come from a very arid climate. My sinuses have been driving me crazy today. I feel like I've been waterboarded most of today. So I would love you to continue, and we can always pick this up again.
But we can do it round two.
Yeah, sure. Finish with whatever slides you want to do, and then if you're cool with it, I'll just make a final statement, and then you can have your final statement, and we can just wrap this up if you don't mind, just because
yes,
and the late hour and all that. And by the way, good point, because again, I don't think I really am able to competently, or at least confidently, give you a good answer as to what I am expecting from my model in terms of a backwards extrapolation. But go ahead.
Okay. And I totally understand what you're saying. Because this point you made is the same point you made, I think, I don't know, maybe 8 months ago now, when I was having the discussion with Rob Rowe. And I don't want to leave this misrepresenting your position. That's why I have to ask.
Okay? That's fine. I appreciate that. Sure.
No worries. When we're looking at these trees, this is DNA. For example, this is mitochondrial DNA right now. And I put this one up because I think this is fascinating, because if you look closely, you have 3 major nodes, L, M, and N. Okay. And remember, mitochondrial.
Is that where, just out of curiosity, is that Hem, Shem, and Japheth? I'm just wondering.
Well, more specifically, since this is mitochondrial DNA, this would actually be their wives.
Oh, their wives. Sorry. Okay.
Right.
Okay.
No, that's fine.
Right, yeah.
So I find it amazing that mitochondrial DNA diversity worldwide actually goes back, when represented on an unrooted phylogenetic tree, to 3 major nodes. Well, I mean, is that a coincidence that mitochondrial DNA diversity worldwide goes back to 3 major nodes? And we know from the Bible, we all came from what? 3 women, right? You got Noah, his wife. They probably didn't have any more kids. Shem, Ham, and Japheth, and their wives. So 3 major nodes, all worldwide diversity goes back to. But here's the thing, and this is my question to you. I want to emphasize, this is mitochondrial DNA diversity worldwide. So this includes, your HVR haplogroup in Europe.
Sure.
This includes, random inbred side branches. The mutation rate in general in the mitochondrial DNA is high. That's the point, in general. Now, in some, like, let's say inbred groups, or some groups that are, I don't know, closer to the equator, there is environmental factors that can speed it up. But here's the point that I want to make clear. Generally, the rule is it's fast. It's about 0.5 per generation, okay? 1 every other generation. It's generally fast. In some isolated groups, okay, it might be faster. But the point being made is that doesn't really help the old Earth case, because that just means more DNA differences to be passed on, since what we're looking at is mitochondrial DNA diversity worldwide. And overall, you're only looking at a max of about 100 to 120 differences that separate any 2 people. We'll do the math. If you're looking at a mutation rate that's 1 every other generation, that doesn't take very long to accumulate that many DNA differences, which means as young Earth creationists, we can sit back, relax, laugh, and be like, okay, we can now account for bottlenecks. We can account for genetic drift. We can account for purifying selection, because we have a few hundred generations to work with anyways. But the old Earth creationists, I believe, they have a problem, because they got to somehow take this DNA diversity back a couple 100,000 years. And I just don't know. I need to see a model. I just don't know how that's possible, because you know what? That's a lot of purifying selection to remove all of that DNA diversity. And you got to obviously have an explanation for that too. So I guess my question is, why do these side groups that you're pointing to, that maybe they stack up more mutations for whatever reason?
Right.
why do you believe that helps your case? To me, it seems like it just make it worse. Go ahead. I'm
Well,
just curious to that.
to me, it's the multitude of various factors integrated into the idea or the concept of the model. So, like I don't look at Noah as the singular, genetic bottleneck. Like I look at the idea that if I was viewing the idea that humankind has been around for, which by the way, I think is high. I don't take a theistic evolutionist view where it's like hundreds of thousands of years. The way that I'm looking at it, I'm expecting 30, 40. I'm kind of looking at it more of like oh God, sorry. Gosh, I can't believe I forgot the reasons to believe. Reason like Fuzz Rana's model, like they don't necessarily really try to stretch it back hundreds of thousands of years. Like they will think that maybe we have an expectation of Adam and Eve, somewhere, maybe in some instances. I think they've kind of extrapolated a couple models where they think it could be 100,000 years, some instances 40,000 years, something like that. And it's been a while since I looked at. I don't know if they've updated the model. I'm sure they have from the last time that I've looked at it. And I would have to familiarize myself with that. But that being put aside, what I'm seeing and what I'm presenting as the argument that if you had human beings in the population who had a larger, stronger, better genome that had healthier integrity,
Pre-flood?
Yes, correct. Pre-flood, yeah. Well, even after flood, actually, really after flood, because let's look at the idea of, let's just take it from Noah after. Okay, lots of bottlenecks, lots of extinction events, genocides. Abel, thank you. That you know what? That's another example. That's a perfect example. If we look at it through the idea, and I don't, but let's just say for argument's sake, for your model, let's just say that it was just basically Cain and Abel who ended up being born, and they were going to be, the lineage that all of humankind was basically going to go off of. And then you have, Cain kill Abel. And so now all of Abel's genetic lineage is just taken off the table. Now, there would have been, I'm sure, of course, because they came from Adam and Eve. So there's going to be some overlaps, some overlaps, but not like what it is today. Like in Pakistan, let's say, just for example, Cain and Abel were male and female, and Cain didn't kill Abel, and they reproduce. Well, they're direct siblings. They're not going to have the same issue of stacked mutation or mutation rates as, say, for instance, a brother and sister in Pakistan today. Do you see what I'm saying? Like the integrity of their genome was so good. It was so close to the original source of its high level of integrity that first of all, I think there would be a lack of genetic mutation simply from that alone. That's what I would expect from my view, the way that I'm seeing it.
Okay, so would you say, just one clarifying question, would you say the reason why we have low variation in, let's say, the mitochondrial DNA in the Y chromosome, in light of the faster mutation rates, is because tribal warfare,
right? Lots of bottleneck events, lots of famines, plagues, genocides, wars, all of it. And with each one of these events, and we haven't cataloged all of human history by any stretch of the imagination, so we don't even really necessarily know. But in my view, whatever they were, however many they were, with each one of those events, with each one of those, I call them, I guess, a mini, it's not really a bottleneck. It's just a removal of part of the genetic stock. With each one of those, there is going to be basically a necessary increase in the amount of mutations or the mutation rate. And that even goes to what I'm talking about, where they're stacking, right? So now when there's less diversity, there's going to be more stacking, and the more stacking is going to lead to a justification of looking at, oh, look, there's going to be an increased set of genetic mutations or genetic errors. I mean, look at it just as errors, like that. You have a filtered down, bottlenecked genome that is now, I'm sorry, excuse me, sorry,
no worries.
that is breeding with itself. And so now it's going to have those type of stacks of errors and mutations that wouldn't have necessarily been at the same rate as, say, 2, 3, 4, 10 generations prior. It was a better genome. It had more information. The information was more secure. Like the information had a higher integrity. There was like when the
If I
gene.
could, Smokey,
Go ahead.
because what you're saying is what I agree with. And I like to point out that yes, we have to account for the bottlenecks, we have to account for extinction events, we have to account for warfare, we have to account for death, disease, famine, and purifying selection just in general. Okay.
Correct.
And that is kind of my point all along, is that no matter what compartment we look at, and you're bringing up good points, and that's where we come to the bigger picture is, and you've heard me say it, who can make the best testable predictions that leads to the greatest model? Because it's my pushback, my argument that there's no way, even with all of this purifying selection, all of this war and conquest and famine, and even with a slower mutation rate than what we see today, that we can explain, and I'll go back to this, that we can explain this mitochondrial DNA tree or this Y chromosome tree in really anything under anything other than 4 to 6 or 7,000 years, because again, the young earth creationist still has ample amount of purifying selection, conquest, famine, war to consider, because the mitochondrial DNA tree, for example, if you notice here, this is what I was saying earlier, I just want to kind of prove it to the audience. Since Eve's mitochondrial sequence has been reconstructed and published, okay, this is the published right here, the Eve mitochondrial consensus sequence. You can read the paper. There's one in a creation journal, but you know, a lot of critics are like, oh, creation journal. Well, there's also one in a secular journal that you can look at too. And they published it, and they point out, on average, the individuals in our data set differed from the Eve consensus by only 21.6 nucleotides. I mean, that is nothing. And yet you have a mutation rate, Smokey, that is 0.5 per generation. I just want to make sure. Okay, here we go. Occurs at a rate of 1 every other generation. Okay, so here we go. If you've only got on average 21.6 nucleotides that differs from the Eve consensus sequence, but you have a mutation rate of, let's say, 1 every other generation, do the math. It doesn't take long to accumulate those. And then therefore we have a ton of room as young earth creationists for what you're talking about, the bottlenecks, the extinction events, the famine, the war, the purifying selection. I understand all that. But like, from your position, the old earth position, you guys are going to have to work out some kind of model and be like, okay, well, how much of that? And is it an unrealistic amount? Because we can account for that, but I find the young earth creationists can account for more of a realistic amount of it, where the old earthers like, well, we got to push this into the 200,000 year or the 150,000 year range. I don't see how you're going to get that from these phylogenetic trees. And we're just going to have to see a model, I think, from you guys. Is what I said make sense, Smokey? And what are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, no, I think I get where you're coming from. I guess I can say this as kind of just the macro point, and I'll let you kind of have your final statement. That is exactly what I'm talking about when I'm saying I think our full grasp of like the actual state of human history and cataloging the idea of extinction events and variables that could affect mutation rates, environment, and inbreeding and then breeding back into the population and so on and so, like the isolation of genetic stock being integrated into the increase of genetic stock, all of these events that will filter humankind's genome down to a much more simple or less diverse version. Is basically then there's that variable to be considered, which I think is hard for both sides to necessarily completely anticipate all of these factors and how they integrate into the rate of mutation. I'm willing to give credit to the idea that at the creation of man, we're dealing with a perfect genome and perfect, good. It was very good. I'm going to be careful with my words here. A very good genome. And with the intention, I believe, that if mankind had continued and remained with God and had not fallen, there was no reason to not believe that basically there would be no genetic entropy. Okay. What that means is no murder, no war, no famine, no pestilence. And mankind could have continued with no threat of genetic entropy or genetic meltdown whatsoever, because God created the genome in such a way that, say, for instance, if mankind just continued to live, if no one killed each other, if no one died, and mankind just continued to produce, well, what do we have? We don't have any extinction events. We don't have any bottlenecks. We don't have any factors, environmental factors, famine, pestilence, whatever. We have nothing that will necessarily need to deteriorate the human genome. That basically the way that God designed it was so good that if mankind had stayed on the path of no sin, we would never worry about something like genetic entropy, genetic diseases, genetic problems. The reason we suffer, the reason we get genetic diseases, the reason that our genome breaks down is basically a judgment on us, because we sinned and we brought death into the world. And this is causing us to suffer. This is causing us to get diseases. This is causing us to get weaker genomes as time goes by and higher mutation rates. If you don't mind with that, I will actually yield. I would love to do a part 2 of this when I can go back and actually get a better answer to your question, to answer your model question, because I don't want to dodge it. I would just rather be better prepared to approach that part of it next time. With that, I'm happy to yield the debate at this point. I'd like to take up a part 2, and you can take as much time as you want and wrap it up, show whatever slides you want.
Okay. I appreciate that concluding statement there. And definitely, this is an important issue. And it helps us, this type of technical and, as I like to say, sophisticated dialogue, which I believe this was, helps us to arrive at the strongest model. So why not? Especially with the old earthers, they at least hold to, most of them, the special creation of Adam and Eve. Okay. Unfortunately, many old earthers do say a lot of these side branches like Neanderthals, Heidelbergensis, Floresiensis, Erectus, so on and so forth. They'll say these are not humans. Right? I don't believe that's the case. I believe that their differences in morphology, physiology, and genetics can be explained by the fact that most of these groups, interestingly enough, are found in isolation, found inbred, and when we have their genetics, we find that they're incredibly genetically compromised. Now, I do believe that God has, through his foreknowledge, given us ways to combat genetic degeneration, the eventual genetic degeneration, and that, for one, is redundancy. Right? Redundancy is great design. Any computer coder knows that redundancy is necessary design. And God also front-loaded the genomes of living organisms with DNA repair enzymes. Right? We accumulate many, many mutations in our lifetime. And thankfully, only a few of those are passed on. Right? If every single mutation was passed on, that would be immediate extinction. Or if we didn't have these DNA repair enzymes working full time at pretty much every moment in the day, we'd be, again, extinct after a couple generations. But here's the thing. Think of redundancy like the tire wearing on your car. Right? Eventually the tire does go bald and you got to get new tires. Okay. So it's not like it's completely neutral. No, every time you get in your car and you drive around, you are wearing down your tires. And if you get a flat tire, guess what? That spare tire is going to come in handy. Thank God for that spare tire. That's redundant to the evolutionists. Like, what's that doing there? The car's already got 4 tires. Why is there a random tire, in the trunk of the car? Well, no, if you get a flat tire, it's good. But here's the thing. Once you use the flat tire, or once you use the spare tire, that's it. It's gone. Redundancy is also affected by mutation. So in the pre-flood world, here's the thing. You have a pristine genome that is fully functional. At creation, you have God who front loads living organisms with pre-existing heterozygosity, design diversity that natural selection can call upon and utilize for adaptive episodes. You have the epigenome, you have recombination, gene conversion that leads to diversity. But when you do get a mutation, which is still essentially a typographical error in a text, in a 4-dimensional genome that's chock full of beta information with overlapping codes, it's nested, well, you know what? It can only go downhill. So even in the pre-flood world, you'd still be looking at genetic degeneration through mutations. But you know what? You got a bigger size genome. You start off with a pristine genome without deleterious mutations, therefore no recessive mutations to come to the forefront. Okay, that means genetic degeneration is worse now, but still a reality even in the past. And if patriarchal drive is true, which I do believe it's true, I think there's some fascinating lines of evidence that demonstrates man did live to 900. One line of evidence is the fact that we have longevity genes that we know have been broken. They are degenerate. Turn those back on. Oh man, you can get a glimpse into just how healthy man was, I think, in the pre-flood world. But these types of genes start breaking down, you're going to experience, of course, genetic degeneration and disease. So I think it's always been a reality. But here's the last thing I'll say is it comes down to the bigger picture. What model is best? What model makes the best testable predictions? And I've said this over and over again. Dr. Nathaniel Jensen, he's tested this. He said, okay, if what is true, based on what Smokey and I have been talking about, here's the Y chromosome tree, here's the mitochondrial DNA tree. If these really only go back a few hundred generations max, a few thousand years, let's say, to Y chromosome Noah, mitochondrial Eve, okay, then he predicted we should be able to read the history of civilization off of these genetic compartments. We should be able to detect genetic signatures and genetic stamps. The Roman Empire, Genghis Khan's empire, transatlantic slave trade, the migration patterns, let's say when humans entered the Americas, all these different things. It should all fit within 4,500 years. And so, this has led to an active research program, and he's tested he's published numerous technical papers. Here's one testing the predictions of the young Earth Y chromosome molecular clock. Population growth curves confirm the recent origin of human Y chromosome differences. Okay, this is just one. He's just released a book called Traced. It's full of confirmed predictions where he has literally traced the history of civilization in the Y chromosome, by the way, uniparentally inherited DNA, back just 4,500 years to Noah. So the fact that we have a confirmed testable prediction here based on the assumption or conclusion that these really are a reflection of just thousands of years rather than hundreds of thousands of years. What does that say? Well, it says that we are meeting the gold standard of science because we are taking this data, making future testable predictions, and these predictions are now in print as being confirmed. So I think from here to kind of further the discussion, we would then have to see a more superior model than the young Earth creation model of ancestry. And a lot's been said today. It's been a lot of fun. Looks like the chat has had fun too, which is good. And hopefully we can, have more of these productive discussions and conversations. And I appreciate it. It was a lot of fun.
Cool. Do you want to take a few minutes? I don't know, like 5-10 minutes for Q&A, like from the audience. Do you want to do that? Or do you
whatever you want, whatever would
I mean, I don't
would
mind. I mean, probably most of the questions are for you anyway. It's up to you, really.
You know what? Whatever would benefit the audience, yes. But I do need to run to the washroom real quick. I've drank a lot of water and coffee here.
Actually, you know what? I do too. So you do that. I'll do that too. Kenny, are you still awake?
Kenny is dreaming about created heterozygosity.
There's no way he is still awake. Okay, no, go ahead, man. Go ahead and go to the washroom. I'll do the same. Guys, just bear with us. And we're going to do a few minutes of Q&A if you guys want it. The debate started at 1 hour, 40 minutes, SFT. So you want to know the easy point for Raw Matt to go back and clip it. That's where it's at for you. A fun time, guys. I'll tell you what. Let me do this. I'll just run it to the bathroom real quick. Sorry, I was eating some popcorn. I hope you guys enjoyed it. Here, let's do this. Let's go ahead and start collecting the questions. Do me a favor. Here's what I want you guys to do. If you want a question, tag either me, Smokey, or Standing for Truth, who you want the question to go to. Okay. And I'll start looking at the side chat right now. I'll freeze it where it's at here on my side. And we'll do, I don't know, maybe 5-10 minutes of Q&A. Something like that. So if you guys are watching and you have some questions or anything you want to ask either me or Standing, feel free to pop it in the side chat and just make sure you tag one of us so I know who the question is directed to. You see what happened? Did Kenny moderate a damn thing this entire time? He just sat in the room with his picture trying to look pretty, showing his uncle and aunt up there. Great, Kenny. Great moderating, Kenny. Sleep well, Kenny. You can have him in the room now. You know what, Kenny? Good night. You can go from the room. That's it. We're good. That was great moderating. Good stuff. You just sat there. And looked pretty. All right. That was fun. I'm looking forward to get some of that stuff out, get it off my chest, and see what the responses were. Give me a few things to think about, and go back and actually kind of research anew a little bit. So that's good. That is very good.
Thank God for Kenny, because if it weren't for Kenny boy, this definitely would have been a dumpster fire.
Right?
I mean, all that moderating he did.
So bad. He just had to keep jumping in and make sure we didn't rip each other's throats out. I know it was terrible.
He earned his paycheck, that's for sure. So
Gavin says Kenny was with us in spirit. Yeah, great. I did ask them if they had any questions a couple minutes ago, but I haven't seen anything come in yet. You guys still got 31 watching though. It's pretty good for middle of the night. Guys, if you have questions, if you guys have questions, chime up now, because otherwise we're just gonna wrap this up and send Standing on his way there. Anyone?
Why don't we do this? We're gonna cut it here. So if I upload this.
Sure.
I think I will. As a good discussion. I'll upload it as like an impromptu debate kind of thing.
Sure.
So we'll cut it here. And if you want, if you were going to do a few minutes of Q&A, you can ask me a couple soteriology related questions if you wanted to, that have just been on your heart and mind that you wanted to get out, or save that for another day. It's up to you. However you want to spend the next 10 minutes. Go ahead.
I really don't want to think that hard about that after all of this, honestly.
No, that's fine. Okay, let me ask you a question then.
Sure,
given the fact that you kind of acknowledge the reality of genetic entropy, the fact that mutations do degenerate, if you had to put a number on it, and you don't, I know I'm putting you on the spot, but young Earth creationists, we can safely say, okay, mutations are accumulating, they're degenerating, especially the human population. I mean, we have thousands and thousands and thousands of mutation related diseases popping up. Absolutely. Cancer's on the rise. Autism clearly has a genetic component to it. Immunological related diseases. Everybody that you know,
and as we know,
autoimmune.
As we're starting to figure out, which is something that the evolutionists have to deal with. Well, I mean atheists. I should be careful with that. I mean the atheists have to actually cope with is the fact that many diseases that we're noticing that are happening of a genetic nature are actually a byproduct of what they once called junk DNA, because it's not coding. So they figure, well, we're not going to study it. We're not going to really look into it. Well, it looks like there's lots of genetic issues, including autism, ADHD, many mental issues that are from variances, mutations, or errors in the non-coding section of our DNA. And if the stupid atheists had not seen it as junk DNA for the better part of 4 decades, we could have been studying it more intently and finding and discovering solutions and sources for many of the genetic errors, the genetic diseases that we're noticing today. Because it's not useless information. It's just not leftover junk from monkey men, but it actually is there intended with a specific purpose. And if that is true, then that means even inside the non-coding sections of the DNA, it's still highly functional for the integrity of the genome itself. So if that helps.
Yeah. Well, it's true. Yeah, because they've assumed, well, most of the genome here, especially the non-coding DNA, is junk, and therefore, what's the point in studying it? It's
We
worth
only needed it when we were monkeys. We don't need it anymore, right?
It's evolutionary. That's why they love looking to the ERVs, the endogenous retrovirus sequences. Look at these genetic fossils, reflective of common descent, common ancestry, and then by accident, it's always by accident. By accident, they discover highly functional roles in these ERVs because they're not looking for it, because they have this evolutionary based mindset, starting point, and worldview. We got a question here.
We got a question. Looks like John Q. I assume it's for you. It says, how could Black genetic genome evolve in African continent in like 40 generations?
So essentially, the question comes down to, how do we explain the higher levels of genetic diversity in Africa? Is that what you gather from it too?
Well, he says, well, let me put up the next statement. Maybe this clarifies here. I'm actually not sure myself, honestly. He says, ridiculous, isolate only the Black genome in sub-Saharan African, I imagine, in 40 generations, ? No way. He says, I'll be honest with you, Standing. I'm not even entirely sure how to parse that question myself, to be honest.
No, that's fine. No, I think I understand. I understand. This is
Okay,
a
go
typical objection. He just kind of worded it a little differently, but I'm pretty sure that's what he's getting, and he can clarify if I'm answering it wrong. So we did kind of touch this in our discussion here, and it's a good question. Why do? And I'm actually going to be debating David Neff on this, and I believe it's a couple weeks. And the title of the debate is "Out of Africa or Out of Middle East." I would say out of Middle East, right? At the Tower of Babel. So why do Africans have more genetic diversity than non-Africans? Evolutionists say, well, this is because Africans are an older population and therefore go back much further than 6,000 years. But a couple of things. We touched on earlier the fact that African Americans actually have more of the gene called the PRDM9 gene, and that specific gene controls recombination. And it turns out, and I've got a technical paper on this, which is amazing. It's actually been forced a lot of evolutionists to have to admit this as well. African genomes have more PRDM9 sites than non-Africans. So what does that mean? Well, go back in time. Historically, there could have been more recombination in African populations, and more scrambling in a population means what? It means that population can harbor more genetic diversity. So the question is, why do Africans have more genetic diversity than non-Africans? That's just one of the many reasons. They are also closer to the equator. They also essentially throughout history, a lot of them lived in tribes, isolated tribes, which means there could have been a faster mutation rate. Dr. Nathaniel Jensen, he actually made a prediction in his book, Replacing Darwin. He said, you know what? The Khoisan peoples, one of the most divergent peoples on the planet, their mutation rate has not yet been measured. And he made a prediction. He said, you know what? When we actually measure their mutation rate, we get their DNA, get their blood, and measure it. He predicted it's going to be, roughly 2 times as fast.
Interesting.
We also know that Africans historically, they married at a younger age. I think it was like 15 or 16, which means if you're getting married at a younger age, maybe you're reproducing at a younger age, and therefore, more generations, therefore more mutations are passed on, therefore more diversity accumulates.
Pedophiles.
How dare they? But it does explain the diversity levels, and therefore it explains like the number one Dr. Dan Stern Cardinal objection. Why do Africans have more diversity? Dan's always asking. Well, here's one or two of the many reasons. So
can I give you a perspective from kind of my model, like the way I see it too?
Sure.
So for let's say like prior, well, not even after the flood, let's say up to the Tower of Babel, right? Mankind was rebelling against God's command to spread out and multiply. They kept staying close together. They weren't really tribal. In fact, they were supposed to be. They were supposed to, well, God commanded, like, be fruitful, multiply, spread out over the whole earth. Well, they didn't. They stayed close together, and then they started amounting iniquity. They became debaucherous. They became murderous. They became, devouring. They were hateful, and that caused a problem because they didn't do. I'm not saying this is the only reason, but you know what I mean. Like, this is part of the problem, is that they were staying close together. They were staying isolated. So if they had like a larger genome or a genome with better integrity, okay, they were still breeding, with each other, but without a lot of tribalism about it. Like, lots of people just living in a very, very close area, all of them interbreeding at the same time. Same all the way up to the Tower of Babel. Up to the Tower of Babel, what is mankind doing? Still denying God and his command to be fruitful, multiply, and spread out over the whole earth. So significantly less amount of tribalism until you get to the Tower of Babel, where then you have the confounding of the speech. And then they're basically forced to have to do what God had been telling them to do since the beginning, which is be fruitful, multiply, spread out over the whole earth. And then at that point, you have more tribalism, more opportunity of increased mutation rates because of basically bottlenecks of tribes and pestilences and stuff like that. Now, when a pestilence or a war or a genocide happens, it has a lot more impact upon the integrity of the genome and the rate of mutation rates than it may have previously when mankind was much more clustered together. Does that make sense?
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Okay.
And that's one thing that a lot of, unfortunately, theistic evolutionists don't consider is these kinds of factors: environment, genetic, tribal warfare, or the fact that you have these people groups living in tribes, for example. Especially after Babel, you have all these different groups spreading out into different parts of the world, and then you have a group that moves into Africa, right?
That's why I don't, by the way, so that's part of
Yeah,
why
go on.
I also don't like the theistic evolutional model, because in my view, this is how I see it. Like, a lot of what you present, I think, does actually create significant problems if you hold to a theistic evolutionist model. Because if you're thinking out of Africa or something like that, and you have humans that are indeed spread out everywhere, they are very tribalized, then your model and your arguments would fit as a better challenge to that. Because then in their model, where they are stretching humankind, back 200,000, 300,000, 400,000 years, whatever it is, they're stretching it all the way back, and yet they're claiming, well, mankind already is basically spread out. There already is tribalism. There already is isolated genetic haplogroups. All of this is already happening. But, like, for me, I would take it the opposite way, where I would say, well, Standing's argument, if it was going against a theistic evolutional model, I think does create some significant problems for them. Because then the very things you rely upon to be able to state that, well, the genetic, the mutation rates did have justification for being close to, if not similar to, the same speed that we see today, because humankind basically had a similar layout or makeup, or being spread out and being very tribal and isolated in geographic areas, much as it did back then, closer to how it is today. And today we have airplanes, we have cars, we can get around, we can go. We can go have sex with someone in Europe. Couldn't do that, 2,000 years ago. So there was a necessity of isolation. If that isolation was true, I do think that is actually a big problem for the theistic evolutionary model.
Well, it's especially a problem. If you could screen share my screen for 2 seconds. As you know and love, I got 9,000 slides to go through. So the PRD of 9.
We do have another question.
Sarcastically.
We do have another question from Kermsner, but go ahead and do your thing. Go ahead.
Okay.
I'll put that up.
Yeah, when that African question came up, I was frantically trying to find the actual studies for it. I did just pull them up here just to show, the critics if they if they don't believe it. So here we go. PRDM9 controls activation of mammalian
And by the way,
recombination.
just as a quick side note,
Yeah.
atheists, this is why you fail, okay? Because you don't even consider with any real integrity or honesty an internal parsing of the model that's presented. You always operate from an external set of almost your own ad hoc presuppositions. Like you need it to be a certain way. And when the young earthers or even the old earthers come in, we are willing to actually crawl into your model and make statements. You, however, are always standing from the outside looking in. Go ahead, Standing. Please go ahead.
Oh, that's a good point. I appreciate it. So here's an excerpt. Studies of highly diverse species have revealed two mechanisms by which meiotic recombination is directed to the genome through the PRDM9 binding. Okay, so this is legit. And if you go down here, this is what's fascinating is, and for sake of time, I won't read through all of this, but in people of West African ancestry have led to a shift in the recombination landscape compared with people of non-African ancestry. Notice this. The larger number of hotspots available to West Africans implies that at the population level, crossovers are more evenly distributed than in what? Europeans, not Africans. And thus, the shorter extent of West African linkage disequilibrium is not due to differences in demographic history alone, as in it may not be that Africans are an older population. And if you look up this paper, it's not a young Earth creationist paper.
Right.
So that's found in a secular journal. And last thing I wanted to point out here, and actually something you said that's a great point, Smokey. Remember, to an extent, the old Earth creationists do agree that a lot of the genetic diversity was probably front-loaded, created, not due to mutations.
Sure.
And creationists, young Earth creationists, would say the vast majority of biparentally inherited DNA, at least, is created, is designed. But here's the problem for the evolutionists, and you were kind of mentioning this earlier with inbreeding and things like this. They don't believe in any kind of creation or design.
Right.
So they believe every single DNA difference, every last little bit of genetic diversity arose how? Mutations. Deleterious mutations. So guess what? They believe in this out of Africa event where apparently humans went through this massive genetic reshaping because they experienced a genetic bottleneck that apparently reduced the people to about, 2 to 10,000. Some say 30,000, but for a prolonged period of time. And eventually, they spread out into all parts of the world, seizing dominion over the planet. But here's the thing. You have all of these mutations then for thousands of years in this out of Africa model that are coming to the forefront and leading to rapid genetic degeneration. Because guess what? The evolutionists believe all DNA differences are the result of mutations. Can you imagine how many mutations then are in recessive form?
That is ridiculous. I agree.
Yeah.
Well, because then you have not only, like, say for us, where we have a special creation event, you have basically a pristine genome at the special creation event, but for them, you have a highly mutated, highly differential type of genome that already has been filtered down again through extinction events. Because you look at coming from say a progenitor species of monkey, the way that the evolutionists would look at it, right? Or the atheists would look at it. Progenitor species of monkey. Well, guess what? That went through genetic drift. It went through extinction events, bottlenecks, increase in mutations over time. And yet somehow, at some point, all of this stacking of errors, stacking of mutations over time is now going to create a better, more secure, stronger genome. I mean, that's insane. It's a ridiculous thing to think. I mean, even at least for a theistic evolutionist, you could say, and I don't agree with this, mind you, but you could say, well, God took a progenitor species, not quite a monkey, not quite a man, infused it with a special creation event, created a pristine new genome, out of it. And then we have the starting clock of all of the variances and mutations and the stacking and all of that stuff. But an evolutionist who's an atheist has to rely upon a ridiculous claim that purely mutations, which tend to have a high probability of being deleterious, a function, hitting the function of a mostly functional genome, not one with a bunch of junk DNA, but one that is primarily mostly functional, both coding and non-coding. And they have to assume that all of those majority negative or neutral mutations ultimately led to basically a better system, a better genome with a higher level of integrity, even though it was isolated and bottlenecked and everything, but somehow it got better. That's not what we see in nature. As we get more bottleneck and more time goes by, we see a deterioration, a stacking of mutations, not a decrease of them. So I agree. That is where their model, in my view, because I do concede to genetic entry. I'm not saying I don't. But I'm saying for their model, the way that I see it, that's a huge problem. That doesn't make any sense. That's not how reality works. Okay, things wear down with time. With each generation, information is lost. The integrity of the information decreases. It's information that goes through entropy. It can no longer be used by the system. The system loses the ability to use that information. It undergoes entropy. It's now outside of the consideration or utilization or utility of the system. It's gone. It's out of it. Cannot be gained back. And then you're going to say that deterioration of the integrity of information over time ultimately leads to an increase in information or increase in the integrity of the genome seems very, very weird. So that's how I see that. If I said anything weird there, go ahead and correct it if you want.
No, you said a lot right there, and a lot I agree with. And I like looking to it like one single spelling mistake, let's say in a book the size of an encyclopedia, right? On its own, it's inconsequential, but over time, the individual mistakes accumulate. And according to the evolutionists, since mutations, typographical errors, and attacks are the source for all novel genetic variation that selection can act upon, they're going to say that the book's message is going to get better. We're going to get, a better book, a more advanced book.
You could start with an encyclopedia and you will somehow get a better encyclopedia by constantly adding errors to it, which just seems weird. Yeah, I agree. No, I agree with that. This is from Crimson Air. He says, standing for truth, has it ever been observed or demonstrated that the DNA repair function of the autoimmune system has not and cannot account for the genetic entropy of the old Earth timescale? So, I guess he's talking about error correction, most likely.
Right. Yeah, no, that's a good question. We kind of touched on it earlier. And DNA in general is a very fragile molecule. And not only do many of these low impact deleterious mutations that I would say are nearly neutral, not only are a lot of them passed on, but we primarily die due to mutation accumulation. Every cell division, you're essentially accumulating new mutations. And thank God, evolutionists, I don't think, can explain the existence of DNA repair enzymes that prevent us from pretty well going extinct. Right. After just a few generations. So
can I ask you just a quick follow-up on that, if you don't mind? Is it reasonable to think that because of the strength integrity of the genome earlier on, closer to the creation event, less mutations in it, less things that could affect those features or those mechanisms, that those mechanisms would function better and be more capable at correcting errors than what we currently have in our system today?
That's a very good question. And it goes hand in hand with the African genetic diversity question as well, because we point to the PRDM9 enzyme. Because another major objection from Joshua Swamidass, Dan Stern Cardinal is the amount of recombination that would need to take place in just a few thousand years. It's not possible. But we point out, no, at creation you'd have more PRDM9 sites, therefore more effective recombination, therefore more genetic diversity that could be harbored over time. Mutations destroy those sites, and recombination becomes less effective. Well, DNA repair enzymes, I would say, we had more effective working DNA repair enzymes at creation. And over time, those have also degenerated through mutations. Like I pointed out the Neanderthals. There's a good chance that they probably had mutations to very important DNA repair enzymes. And when you destroy important DNA repair enzymes, what does that mean? You might have a hyper mutating lineage because more mutations get passed on, less mutations are fixed during one's lifetime. So yeah, for sure. I agree with that.
I don't know if you want to answer a Starlight model question, but I guess Gavin, I know you've been doing videos on it lately, so I'm not sure if you really want to answer it or just direct Gavin to the video, but I'll read it if you want to. If you think you can answer it real quick, feel free.
Sure.
He says Einstein's E equals mc squared states the speed of light is always constant in speed. The light from the Earendel star takes 12.9 billion light years to reach us. That's a lot older than YEC.
You're right. We did put out a couple videos recently on that. Of course, it's not my expertise, so I know a little bit about it. I can give like a real basic answer in a minute or two.
If you want to, go ahead. Yeah, I mean, if you want to, go ahead. Sure, it's you.
Well, I would say of the young Earth creationist models, there's two main ones. I've argued from both. Gravitational time dilation, which is derived, it's a testable model from Dr. Russell Humphreys. And he would propose that God would have created stars and galaxies while Earth was deep inside what's called a gravitational time well. And what that means is, and time dilation is real, and it's pretty well understood. But the fact is, as Earth would be in this gravitational time well, clocks would actually slow down or even completely stop. Think of it like a trampoline. If you were to toss a bowling ball right into the middle of it, what would it do? It'd sink right to the ground, right? The entire trampoline wouldn't, but you'd have the bowling ball sinking right to the bottom, touching the ground. Okay, so that's where the Earth would be, because it would be at the center of mass. Okay, so the model would suggest, and I'll kind of wrap it up here, that given the Bible says over and over again that God stretches out the heavens, well, after God stretches out the heavens, what comes out last? Well, you'd have the Earth that comes out last, since it's at the bottom of this gravitational time well, and stars and galaxies during that period, that pretty well time on Earth was stopped, would have had massive amounts of time dilation. So you could have the Earth being 6,000 years while the stars and galaxies appearing old. And then the other model is Dr. Jason Lisle's model, which is very, very simple, essentially. And that is that the one-way speed of light is kind of subjective. And the way he explains it is that light, as it's traveling or coming towards an observer, as it's coming towards us, it can actually travel at a different speed than when it's going away from us as the observer. Okay. And we put out a video earlier where it talks about how we can synchronize clocks, and the way that all ancient cultures did it, and the way that Jason Lisle would say the Bible also probably does it, is that they would define now as the way we are seeing something, right? So if we see stars and galaxies, if we see the light, we're seeing it in real time. And so from that view, light takes no time at all to reach my eyes. It would have taken no time at all to reach the eyes of Adam and Eve. It would have been instantaneous. Light would be incoming pretty well as fast as infinity, and light outgoing from the observer would be different. And so long answer short, from that convention, which is just another convention, it's just what convention are you using? So from that convention, Lisle would say that we are looking at distant stars and distant galaxies in real time. So he'd say there's no problem at all. That's a pretty complicated model to kind of wrap your brain around, since Einsteinian physics is kind of mind-boggling. I understand you probably disagreed with all that, Smokey, and that's fine.
But I did,
put it on if you want.
But I'll be honest with you, I have not looked into. I mean, Kenny actually is better at arguing that than I am, because I haven't looked into that in a hot minute. So I just, again, the science is not something I typically study or argue. I am theology, history, morality, metaethics, philosophy. That's me. That's what I don't usually focus on this stuff. It's not really my forte or my area of studying. So maybe in some way, hopefully I may have redeemed that I'm not completely scientifically illiterate and incompetent. As sometimes has been my reputation in the past. So, but I do admit I don't study it, I don't focus on it, but I do think about it when people talk about it and present ideas and arguments. Because
we give each other a lot of jabs and hooks, in the comment section, and then it hypes up these encounters, right?
Right.
And then the audience is like, "Wait a minute, we wanted a dumpster fire."
Right. So, I mean, while I don't study this, my strength is I'm a defragger. I just take the information presented to me and I parse it and I just see if it makes sense or not. This is not one of these areas I focus on. It's not one of these areas I've dedicated tons of study on. So I do concede to that, but it doesn't mean I can't understand what's being presented and want to parse it with a sense of philosophy and logic. So, and I hope that was demonstrated tonight to everyone. I hope that everyone did enjoy it. I did. I think Standing did too. So I guess with that, we can just basically, wrap it up. Did you have any final words or anything you wanted to say to the audience? Standing, feel free.
Yeah, no, I'm glad we did this. I'm glad we called each other out. And, I think it made for a good discussion, a good intellectual discussion.
Were you expecting it to be an easier slam dunk or me just to say a bunch of stupid stuff? Or...
No, because you've been talking about this for a while and you've kind of called me out on it a few times, over the course of however long. I knew I knew you'd have some interesting questions. I knew this wasn't like the typical evolutionist where it's like you go into it, excited for the debate and, you've had it scheduled for months and then they don't know the basics, So no, I knew you'd have some good questions. Okay. And if I could to Gavin, and I'm not going to call him out, but he said, Humphrey's gravitational time dilation and Jason Lyle's models have both been rejected by astrophysics. Okay, so to me, that's more of an assertion. And all I'm asking of Gavin, whatever his objections are to those two models, feel free to email me them. I'll examine them, and then hopefully the next time I have Lyle on, we'll present him Gavin's objections and have him address them.
Okay. All right. Super cool. Sounds good. All right.
Oh, look at Crimson Air. He's hyping up a free grace neck. And since it's been more than an hour, Guru Lady, remember, donate that to charity.
That's true, Guru. Get that on to hey, can I get your affirmation that we'll put together a free grace conversation, much like what we just did here?
Yes, as long as Guru Lady donates whatever that
Guru?
was to a charity of her choice. Not me, because a lot of people are like, Standing is going to be grabbed. It doesn't have to do with the money. Keep it or donate it to a charity.
pick an honorable charity. I personally, maybe Standing likes this idea too. The children currently affected with the war in Ukraine are in desperate need of resources. I like that. Standing, I don't know how you feel about that. That feels like a good charity and very timely. So
sounds good to me.
There you go.
Sounds great.
Okay, there you go. Send us the receipt. We'll post it up, and we'll say that was contributed by you for the sake of the debate that finally happened between Standing and me, and we'll finally get our free grace something set up here at some point. So good stuff, great stuff. Anything else, Standing? And thank you for the time. Starts at 1 hour 40, just so you know.
Okay.
Maybe a couple minutes before, goes to 3 hour 50, right to the tail end, and I'm gonna get ready to shut it down. So probably right at 4 hours. So clip out as much as you want.
So we went 2 hours.
We did. We went 2 hours.
Wow.
Yeah.
There you go. There's a full debate. Didn't really feel like it. No. So
didn't even. No, actually, I was figuring we would maybe knock this out for the most part, 30, 45 minutes. But no, we carried it throughout. So yeah, absolutely. Yeah. I'm very happy with it. I do want to do a little more research and maybe do a part 2 because I want to be able to have more of a particularized model to present to you or a good justification as to why I can't have one. So one of those two things will occur, but I would need to do a little more research before I could say that with any confidence. So if that, but yeah, I'd be happy to do this again for round 2 if you would as well.
Sounds good to me. I had fun. 2 hours flew by. Yeah, it'll probably make for a decent premiere too in the next couple
Cool.
of days,
Well, there you
because
go.
it was impromptu. Many people probably don't even know it happened. So
Correct.
we'll let them know what happened, and
There you
we'll
go.
let people enjoy it. And Crimson Air says it was edifying. So Crimson
Beautiful.
Air, my good man, I appreciate that, and I'm glad to hear that.
All right. Well, then I guess with that, we'll wish you a good evening. Go get some rest. I will do the same. I hate this weather. I hate this temperature. I hate this air over here. I want to get back to the desert because it's just murdering my throat. I don't know what they call it. There's some sort of like weird sinus thing that happens to people when they go from like the north to the south or the east to the west. And whatever that is fully hitting my head like a sack of bricks today. So I'm happy I was able to perform as well as I did, because it feels like I'm just walking with my head through clouds. Like I was just basically breathing through a wet towel all day. So yeah, thank you for accommodating standing, and it was actually a fun time, and I did actually get a lot of my questions answered and some clarifications, and I know where to go next to start researching the next layer of the argument and the perspective of the model. So thank you for accommodating your time. Thank you for certainly your gentlemanly approach to the debate, and we kept it very sophisticated, even though before this we basically been hating each other. So hopefully this will show a semblance of integrity to the community that they can also appreciate and see as a gesture of good ethics and positive dialogue that can be maintained even by two human beings that up to that point had basically completely despised each other. So thank you. Thank you for the time. I hope you have a pleasant rest and a good evening, and I look forward to picking this up with the next one.
Okay, well, I can't top that, so I'll leave on that note. Much appreciated. Good discussion. Thanks to everybody in the chat, and yeah, we'll talk soon. Have a good night.
Sounds good. Take care, Sandy. Awesome. All right, guys. Well, there we go. I guess we'll wrap it up. I hope you guys enjoyed. I did. I've been wanting to crack into that for a hot minute, probably about since 7-8 months ago when we had our last interaction on this particular topic, and then I kind of had the chance to defrag it in my brain, think about it a bit more. Now, was actually able to engage with standing at a level that let me now know where I need to look and research to kind of move or look at the model or the argument at a slightly different or deeper, not different, but deeper layer, which I will do. And I know really where he's going with probably where the part 2 would go with kind of his challenges, looking at the idea of the model and accounting for the different factors that may or may not ultimately end up altering mutation rates, and how much accounting either side of the opposition can actually attribute to in their particular model. So it'll also give me something to spend a little bit of time doing some extra research in. So yeah, well, thanks. I know I sound like I'm underwater. I feel like I'm underwater. It definitely feels like that. Definitely. My throat and mouth and sinuses are absolutely freaking miserable, and it just kind of hit me today. So I've been out here, for a couple of weeks. I've been fine for the most part. It's been rainy. It's been humid. Feels weird. I'm not used to humid temperature, but today in particular, it just hit me right in the head like a sack of bricks. So I hope you guys enjoyed it. I did. I know Standing did. So this was a good thing. I think this was a great interaction, and I do look forward to a couple more in the future, particularly a part 2 on this, and then also the free grace debate. Certainly my preference being focused around Matthew 7, which again I wouldn't think would necessarily take too long in terms of a day, but never know. I didn't think this one was going to take long. We fit it into a full 2 hours, so good for us. Thank you so much, guys. I appreciate it. I hope you have yourselves a good rest of your evening. Hope you sleep well if you are in that part of the world. I'm certainly going to go get some sleep and then get a little breakfast here shortly. I appreciate you guys. You know, I love the backbone of this community, the contributors, the chat, the mods. You know, you guys are all awesome. You're rock stars. You know, I love you to death. And it's all, you guys are the only reasons I continue to do this, because you're all worth it. I love you guys, and I hope you guys will stay on the path of truth and always be strengthened, exhorted, edified, and sharpened by what you learn from this channel. Get better justifications for what you believe, and be able to contend against those who are going to attack or oppose what the Bible says or what it teaches in terms of the ability to prove and rationally give good justifications of what we should see in reality and in sciences, whether it's coming from a young earth perspective or an old earth perspective, at least based upon your belief or what you think is strongest to defend. You can take some of the equipment and arguments that you learn here and then take it forward into the real world to actually contend for, defend the faith, and also present good arguments that the Bible is from God, because it is definitely true. So awesome. Thank you so much, guys. I really appreciate it. Thank you for taking the time. Thank you for being here. I do wish the peace of Christ to all of the true saints out there. And I am done. I'm taking a nap. I am signing out.